Game over. Game over. You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 583 for April 29th, 2024, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brennan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody, for this week's show. It is going to be a doozy, so buckle up because we have some fun things to talk about. And on this week's show, we are not alone. We have a legend
right
joining us this week. Coming back is the great, the wonderful, the magical Ryan McQuade. Ryan, welcome back, my friend.
You are not alone.
All right, a little less magical now.
What's up, gentlemen?
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome back
Yeah.
to InSession Film. I am Ryan McQuade, and these guys are joining me tonight. Oh, wait, that's
Wrong show.
Wrong show.
Wrong show.
We're back in time.
Wrong show. Hey, wrong show. No, it's great being back here with you guys. And
Absolutely.
it's been too long. Been too long.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know. It's been a few months, but it feels like years.
I know.
So many things.
Yeah.
There's
happened
a
in
lot of
between.
things that happened. There's a national championship for Michigan. Which I really didn't want to. Why did I bring it up? God,
Yeah, go
because
look,
it
baby.
reminds me of the national championship that my team didn't win.
Yeah.
That I will tell you to this day. I'm going to tell it to JD's face. Yeah, lucky we didn't face you because we would have beat you.
That was also the time that Lee Isaac Chung was filming a movie in my area. Remember that? It caused a bunch of blackouts.
It's this movie they called. It's a French movie, right? It's called Les Twisters.
Let's twist
Right?
it. Yeah, twisters.
Yeah, something like that.
Yes, because Pennsylvania is also France.
There you go. Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely.
We'll have the baguette segment here in a little bit, guys. Don't worry about
Yeah, be prepared for that. It's good to have you back, though, Ryan.
Yeah, man.
I'm very excited to have you here. And it was really interesting. We were just talking about this off mic, but I mentioned what we were going to be doing starting this week to Ryan, and I asked him if he wanted to join, and it was an immediate yes with 1,000 exclamation points. Like he didn't think about it at all.
Listen,
So I'm very
Listen, I come back and I do anything for you guys. You guys know that.
yeah.
But then when I heard what you guys are doing, which is open heart surgery. No, it's talking about Oscar movies.
Oh gosh, yeah, we're not
Best
that
Picture
smart.
winners. Well, okay, you said it.
I
But
did say, well,
yeah,
I'll
you
take
did.
pride in that. It's not something I would ever want to do.
Scalpel. But anyway, when I heard about that, I said, okay, which one are you starting with? And you said Rebecca, which is what we're talking about today. And I said, okay, what time are we starting the show? When are we getting on the mics?
Exactly.
Gives me an excuse to watch this movie again. Okay,
Yeah.
sure, let's go, JD.
Absolutely. So it was a great excuse to get Ryan
And it was
back.
to see Brendan too. It wasn't just to talk about him. It
What's
was
up,
to see
buddy?
Brendan,
What's
you
up?
know what I mean? You know.
Of course. But yes, as Ryan noted, we are starting our Best Picture movie series this week.
Yeah.
Which, as we noted last week, is going to obviously take some time because there's 2,400 winners. So we are breaking it up by decades. So for the next 10 weeks, we'll be doing Best Picture winners of the 1940s.
Yep.
Starting with Rebecca, as Ryan alluded to there. We'll get to that in the back half of the episode. However, I want to start things off here by talking about a religious experience that I had this week.
Okay, Ryan, set your timers. We can be back in like 40 minutes.
I was just gonna say I got something in the oven. I'll go pull it out.
That's fine.
So it'll be perfect.
I could monologue here. It's perfectly okay.
Brendan, you want to try the souffle I just made?
Don't you mean the baguettes?
Yeah, well, I mean souffle baguettes. You know what I mean? Let's go.
Anyway, JD, let's hear about your religious experience.
I took Sam to see Les Twisters in theaters. No, that's not what happened at all.
I was about to say, you guys to see that ahead of time? Like, what the hell? You didn't take us? Like
Les Spider-Man 3 is
exactly.
wow. Who's the Professor Octopus? You know?
Gosh, we're gonna get flagged so badly for this one.
Yes, I apologize to everyone.
You knew
who
what
feels
you were getting
offended.
yourselves into when you
Exactly.
brought me back tonight. It wasn't going to be normal.
Hey,
So
well,
then we're only guilty
100%.
by association.
Yeah, Brendan and I were talking
Absolutely.
through what we wanted to have as far as a lineup for the show goes, and we limited the entire thing to 2, maybe 3 segments because we knew that the show was probably going to go long
Yeah.
with Ryan being here. We signed up for this. That's exactly what we want.
Yep.
At any
exactly.
rate, I took Sam to see Spider-Man 2 in theaters last week. And I've said this before on the podcast, but I'll reiterate it in case we have any new listeners out there, and hopefully we do. Welcome to you.
Yeah.
But growing up,
I'm
Spider-Man was
Wait.
a significant character to my upbringing. It was the Marvel character that I was attached to the most, and so I grew up reading a lot of the Spider-Man comics, of course. Very nostalgic to the cartoon. Hopefully Disney Plus brings that back. I have been really enjoying the X-Men 97 series.
Haven't seen it yet.
It's been
I've heard
really
it.
good.
I've heard it's devastating.
It is
And,
absolutely heartbreaking and way more mature than I remembered. That is an animated show for adults.
Okay.
Gonna put it on right now.
So anyway, hopefully they do that because I loved that cartoon as well. And then you get to the movies, and I was in high school by the time Sam Raimi's movies were coming out. But, I remember sitting in theaters watching that film for the first time in 2004 and having a transcendent experience even then.
Yeah.
And to this day, maybe some of it is nostalgia for sure, but I would argue that it is the best superhero movie made to date. I know some disagree, Ryan, and that's okay. That's perfectly okay.
Madam Web just beat it out.
In what category? What category are we conflating?
We
here, if
talked
that's
about
the case?
the best here.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not that actually.
Happy
for sure.
opposite day, indeed.
Yeah, exactly. Happy opposite day to everybody out there. Madam Web, the best movie of our lives.
Sorry, side tangent, but I was logging what movies I had seen from this year in 2024 and trying to rank what I had seen for about 2 months.
You forgot,
maybe.
didn't you?
I didn't even have Madam Web in there. I totally forgot I saw the movie.
You just forgot about it. It's a completely forgettable experience. Like there's, what's crazy is like I went to the side tangent, obviously, because and sorry, Jenny. When I went to South by, I saw a couple films there, and I remember sitting in a theater and watching them.
Yeah.
And then I was going, and I just, I usually log on the day, and this is part of like my OCD problem with an app that I have fundamental problems with. But I was putting in my films, and you're right, Brendan. It was like that thing. I don't know. Maybe this is something that needs to be examined by people, but with Letterboxd being on the rise, but I just totally forgot about this one movie that I wrote a review about, which was immaculate. And I just was like, wow, I think I was way too kind on this, because if I can't remember anything about this, then maybe it's not good. And I think that I don't actually think it's that good. I'm sorry to Dave Giannini out there.
I know.
I love that he saw something really great in it. I will say, if you want to see that movie, just watch The First Omen instead.
Yeah, or just watch Rosemary's Baby or The Exorcist or like any other good version of that movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
fair.
So, but anyway,
Jenny,
Sydney
back
Sweeney
to Spider-Man
aside, back to this religious experience.
Yes. So I take Sam to see it, and I'm primed, obviously, loving the character, loving the Sam Raimi films.
Had he never seen it?
He had seen it. It has been a while for him, but he has seen all 3 Spider-Man movies.
But he asked you to go to the movies to see it with him, right?
That was a big part of it as
great.
well, because I told him that I wanted to take him to see this, And when I told him, his eyes lit up. I joked on Twitter, it was enough fuel to last me a lifetime. Like his excitement
Yeah.
and joy that we were going to go see this in theaters, because he loves the Sam Raimi films. It's been a while since we've seen them, but I remember one Saturday morning, this was a few years ago. He was a little bit younger, maybe 6.
Okay.
But we spent an entire Saturday watching all of them. And I bet you we watched each of them like 3 times. Wait,
he was, all of them being just the Raimi films, or did you
just
also
the
watch
Raimi
the
films,
Garfield
just
ones
the
as-
Raimi
okay,
films.
Okay.
Yeah,
Why do you want to torture the kid?
Yeah,
You want to show him
exactly.
It's like,
What are you doing?
see, son, this is what happens when Hollywood meddles.
Exactly. Yeah, that's all. I have to wait
This
for. him
is
to
what
get a little
happens
bit
when
older.
we can't have nice things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is a 4th Spider-Man movie from Sam Raimi.
I think we're gonna get
Exactly.
it. I think we're gonna get it.
This is
sometime
what
soon.
happens when studios need to keep the rights that they own of a
Yeah,
property.
Yeah,
that's
that's
certainly
true.
a bigger
That too.
conversation. That's why I have to wait for him to get a little bit older. That's a bigger
Mm.
conversation that
Yeah.
would go
Yeah,
way
that's
over.
fair.
his
Yeah,
head.
why is the guy from the holdover in a rhino outfit? Like, it's I don't know if you can. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that was a
That's-
wild moment. Absolutely wild. At any rate, we spent
Oh,
an
yeah.
entire Saturday. He was in his Spider-Man costume, acting out the whole movie with his
That's cute.
imagination. So
That's cute.
that is a vivid memory that we have together as it relates to these movies. So we do have some experience with them, but obviously that was watching it at home, knowing that these are playing in theaters. I wanted to have an opportunity to take him to see the movie. So we went, and I guess to add some fun levity to the story, we had planned to go last Monday, and I totally screwed up the screening on the app. I scheduled it for theater that was like 30 minutes, like way out of our way on accident. Didn't realize that's what I had done. So by the time we got into my truck to leave, we would not have been there on time. And so I just rebooked it. So we had to wait 2 extra days. But I'm glad we did. So we get to the theater, I get his snacks, all that sort of stuff. And we sit down, and I understand how this sounds like internally, personally to me, like emotionally, I am having this incredibly vivid, emotional, religious experience. When I say these words, though, it's going to sound tacky, and I totally understand that.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
When you're in the theater, watching a movie that's 20 years old, something that has always been close to you, and then you're getting to experience this theatrical setting with your own child, it's hard to articulate the words. So when Nicole Kidman comes on screen and she starts having her little welcome to AMC thing that we all love and adore, like I began to sob, literally began to sob. It was like the
Nicole
first
Kidman,
time.
you got us. You got us.
It was the first time those words really poked through in a real way.
Well, the heartbreak feels good in a place like this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like she says that line, and I look over, and there's my son who's all
We've been
lit up.
ridiculing Nicole Kidman in these commercials for all of these months and years, and all of a sudden now it's like I finally hear
I
it.
get it.
Yeah.
I understand it.
Yeah, it's just so
I know why they paid her this. It's at the core.
so funny because I understand like people, I don't know, ironically, unironically enjoy that bit.
Yeah.
And
I love
I've
the
always
people that
laughed at
stand up
those
and
that like
salute it.
exactly.
You
You
know,
got the people
like,
that stand up and salute. You got the people that will say the monologue alongside her. Like you get those at screenings from time to time. And you laugh, you have fun with all of that. But this was the first time I had heard those words in a more profound way, and it completely set the tone for me. And so like I am sobbing, and then you get the Marvel cue at the beginning, you get Elfman's score kicks in, and I'm a mess. Like I thought about maybe walking out for a second to gather myself because I am just unraveling.
I mean, I can't blame. I mean, like this is a time when movies like this were being made, when even the opening credits were made by the filmmaker, right?
Yeah.
Like even the opening credits had an artistry to them.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's fantastic, and
Yeah.
and the whole time maybe not the whole time because I don't want to freak him out. Like, Dad, why are you staring at me? But like I'm trying to get a glimpse of him as well because this was such a special moment to share with him. And then so we get to the opening credits, and I'm able to control my sobbing a little bit, and I'm seeing Sam light up. And this is where things change slightly.
He looked at him and said, "I hate this movie, Dad."
These two teenagers show up, ironically, at the scene when Peter is trying to deliver the pizzas, and he walks up there to the counter, and she's like, "You're late. I'm not paying for these." That's when these two teenagers sit down, and they start immediately talking openly as if the movie is not playing. And I am on the verge of looking to my left and wondering if I'm going to have to get physical with this kid, because I'm trying to
This
share
just
this.
in, JD will punch a teenager.
Maybe. I mean, to be fair, he was probably in his early 20s, but still much younger than me.
This just in, JD will punch an early 20-year-old.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm trying to share.
He will
this
punch
moment.
a legal adult.
He
in
was
the
a
state of
legal
Florida.
adult. Exactly.
This is, actually, to be fair, Brendan, this is a tame thing that happens in the state of Florida. So
It gets much
Oh
worse.
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
This
We already
is-
talked.
this
We already talked.
This
about
is
the
an
new Roadhouse.
average day.
We already
all
talked
right,
about the new Roadhouse. We know how bad it can get.
Like
Oh,
the headline
God.
would be Florida
forgot
man
about that
eats
movie.
teenager at movie experience.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think
like,
it was
I'm
almost
just-
like the best way to say it is go full Venom on him. 'Cause he's like,
Exactly. I went full Venom, bit his whole head right off. And so he's talking like out loud, openly, as if they're at their own house, and I'm okay. Like, I love it when people are engaged with the film. If you're engaged with the movie and interacting with the screen, that's one thing. I love that. I encourage that.
There's limits to that.
For
some
sure.
People,
Yeah.
Some people, man, I gotta tell you, I go to I go to regular screenings. I go to the festival screenings. I go to a lot of various different screenings.
Mm-hmm.
The people that are engaged with it, that also then like try to make moments out of it instead of it happening organically with the film. Those people got to go and they got to go
I agree.
away.
You can't
They got to go away.
manufacture it.
Like get it out of here. Like
They want to be
agree.
part of the experience. In some
like
way.
they've heard that like this is the scariest movie of all time. People have been screaming in their seats, and then they start doing it, and it's like, this isn't even the scary parts. What are you doing?
Yeah.
So like, people. What I'm saying is, people suck. So continue, Jake.
people do, like, there's absolutely no consciousness to the behavior. It's presumptuous without any sort of awareness whatsoever. And I tried to handle it subtly at first. Like, you look over at them. I didn't say anything, but they could clearly see from my expressions. I'm looking at him eye to eye.
Yeah.
And he knows that I'm upset. But then, he keeps continuing to talk to his girlfriend. And after 10 minutes of it, I leaned over to him. I told him, please, be quiet. I'll keep it PG. And thankfully he did. Once I spoke up, he was mostly good the rest of the way. A couple of times, again, he would engage with what's happening on the screen, which I didn't mind as much. It's just the talking and not being quiet about it, like not being subtle about it, like talking to someone like we're talking to each other right now in a theater setting when the movie is playing, and just having no awareness around like that on its own terms is frustrating. But it had heightened itself because I was having this remarkable moment with my son, and that brought something out of me that I hadn't really experienced in a long time.
Welcome to the club. Welcome to the club.
Yeah. And I was hot. Like, I was really, really upset, but thankfully he calmed down, and then I could enjoy the rest of the moment, or the rest of
I was half
the
expecting
experience.
you to say you were about to tell this person, this teenager, 20-year-old, whatever, to stop talking, and before you had the chance, Sam did it for you. I was half expecting something like that.
Oh man, that would have been like awesome.
That would have been great. Sam doesn't really have a mean bone in his body like that, but he is very
That's
talkative, and he, unlike me, will approach strangers openly, like in public. He
That's
has
just
no
that
problem
age.
doing that.
Kids are just like that, man. They got no filter.
No,
And they honestly, old people and kids, they're gonna just tell you like it is.
exactly.
You want the
Because
honesty about
both
something?
age groups are not going to remember it the next day.
Yeah, exactly. Like shiny
Yeah,
toy. Oh, and then run away.
Exactly. But thankfully it was fine, and I was able to have the moment. And throughout the film, I could see Sam lighting up. I could see him engaging with what's on screen, and we ended up having a great time. So like it was like
That's great.
I was
Love it.
nervous like the first 10 minutes after they showed up, but the rest of it was just this unforgettable moment that, I'll certainly carry with me for a long time. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah,
I love it. I wish I got the chance to see it in a theater, or at least again, because I did see it when it first came out, of course. But to see it again in a theater with my critical lens now to experience that, I wish I had that chance, and I didn't take it.
Are they just doing all these Spider-Man movie re-releases for a reason, like because they need the cash, or I know this is for the 20. I know, like I'm not being a jerk. I'm like, because they're all playing at the Draft House by my house, and so I'm like, wait, why?
Yeah.
I know this one specifically is the 20th, but like they've got them all.
I
don't
think
know why they're
that
doing
was
all.
why. I think that may have been why.
Oh,
I think
okay.
there was the plan to do Spider-Man 2 because it is celebrating its 20th anniversary. So Sony probably thought, why just do Spider-Man 2 a middle chapter of this Raimi trilogy?
That
Let's
makes
just
sense.
do all three.
Well, no, they're even showing the Garfield ones and the Holland ones. They're showing them all.
Now that I didn't know.
Yeah, you can see them all. So
Well,
that's why I was like,
Sony
is
needs
this
the
a
cash,
grab?
okay? They've had
I'm
some
telling
losses.
you,
Did you see Madam Web?
They had
They had some losses.
They had Madam
need-
Web. Yeah.
they need a little bit more
need
money
to tell
from-
people that anything superhero related that involves webbing is actually good. So
I assume so. No, but JD, I love that. And what's so great about that too is like I was thinking about this kind of thing recently because the wife and I are having those conversations, and the movies that I thought about were kind of in that wheelhouse, and you guys know this, and they just announced that they're going to do the theatrical re-release is Lord of the Rings.
yeah.
And I'm telling you, talk about again, Brendan, you hit it nail right on the head. Like the opening music of that for Fellowship as that starts, right? It's just like and you're like, oh, okay, I'm in a different world now.
Yeah.
I can just only imagine my future kids sitting next to me and watching that, because we all remember it's our childhood experience being able to give that back to our little selves essentially. And those movies, I mean, those are going to be longer stays at the theater for myself, like those 4-hour extended cuts, but damn it, that's the only way these kids are going to learn. To sit through a Martin Scorsese movie is to sit through a Lord
Movies
of the
can
Rings
be long
extended
for a
edition.
reason. They can be long for a reason.
Freaking great. Those movies.
I mean, Sam made it through Avatar just fine. And
Way of Water?
Yeah.
That's a good movie.
That's a good movie.
He missed like maybe the last few minutes, but that was it. Like for a movie that's 3 hours, maybe a little bit more. Like he did very well.
Can you guys ready for this? I can't wait for the next Avatar.
Ryan is officially a James Cameron stan. I love it.
How we changed all of our minds.
Big Jim's doing great things.
Well, I think
Right?
Big Jim kind of changed all of our minds. Even for all of us who were excited for Avatar: The Way of Water, most of us didn't expect it to be as dramatically engaging as it was. I think that was the thing that surprised us the most, because that was what the first Avatar was
Emotional
for a lot of us.
Very emotional, and also just like, man, those action sequences just kick ass. Like in the underwater sequences are beautiful.
I love how that whole movie is a tribute to the filmography of James Cameron.
I know, like I love how it becomes like T2 at the end of that movie and aliens mixed together. I'm like, okay, this is totally fine.
The Abyss
like, I'm
thrown
okay
in
with
there,
that.
Titanic in there.
Yeah, exactly. It has it all.
Yeah.
And then it's got like, weird Sigourney Weaver talking to like human Sigourney Weaver. There's some wild shit in that movie. Sorry, JD, I know you don't like the curtain,
No,
but
it's fine.
it's
Totally
appropriate.
fine.
That movie's yeah, what an interesting movie. And that movie made like $2.5 billion.
Yeah.
And it's
Something
like
like
2
that.
hours and 40 minutes, or no, it's 3 hours.
No,
it's like
over 3 hours.
It's like
It's almost 3.5.
320, right?
Yeah, it's almost 3.5.
That's
And people-
crazy. Like
So-
320.
Long movies
And
can
it-
also do well.
I think the thing is that people will see a long movie if it's quality,
Yeah.
Word of mouth.
No.
Word of mouth, baby.
if it's good, and it's got
Oppenheimer.
some. Yeah.
Oppenheimer.
Oh, man, don't get me
Exactly.
started on Oppenheimer. I was thinking about Oppenheimer.
Example.
I was thinking about Oppie today.
He's a
I was
good
thinking
dude.
also about how Brendan, and since I wasn't on the second part of the awards show for
Yeah.
this year,
Yeah.
I was thinking about how disappointed I am in Brendan for just not making Oppie your number one and just going with it. It would have been the first time ever
You know,
we all had it at number one.
I
Like,
would
come
have,
on.
I would
was-
have eaten those words or that choice if I didn't decide to watch Perfect Days a second time and realize, you know what, this is in my top 3 of the whole decade so far. So
Well, Oppie's like my number 2 of the decade so far. So
might
like,
still be top 5 for me, but Perfect
Yeah.
Days just spoke to me in a way that I had to put it at number 1. Just had to do it.
I think Oppenheimer.
I got 2 films to go back and forth on
so
it.
far.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think I go back and forth between it and Tar. You guys know how much I love Tar.
Yeah.
So,
Love
Tar
me
was
some
good.
Tar as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tar's good.
Get some Tar heads.
You know what? We're just gonna start
Uh,
talking best movies of the decade so far. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, you know, we can transition to good filmmakers though, because
Yeah.
Ooh,
I also wanted to bring up Quentin Tarantino, and there's been some
oh boy.
interesting discourse around him lately as well, because
Put your feet up on the
He-
table. Let's talk about it.
I don't have
he, of
socks on right
course,
now, so I could do that.
He wanted to cap
He gets
himself
clicks for
at
sure.
10 movies and decided that his last movie initially was going to be titled The Movie Critic.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
And then he changes his mind and he decides to scrap that. At least that's where we stand right now. However, there was a report last week that was quite interesting where there was a potential concept for The Movie Critic that involved all of his earlier movies existing in the same universe, which means that characters, actors of or in those movies would reprise their roles in The Movie Critic. So we'd bring all of that together. And I'm curious what you guys think of that. You know, we've talked about Quentin Tarantino a lot on the show over the years. Ryan, I know you're a huge fan of Quentin Tarantino as well. Like,
Yeah.
what do you guys think of this idea?
Brendan,
Oh, I'm going first?
I'll let you go first.
You're
And-
okay.
yeah.
I think it mostly works for me knowing that it was potentially Quentin Tarantino's final film. I think in that way, that's where I found it interesting because that concept alone, JD, that you laid out there, it's nothing really new. And I think just on its own terms, I would have preferred to see Quentin do something a little bit more unique for his final film. But since this is his final film, having it work as like a mini tribute to his own filmography kind of makes sense to go that route. I mean, it's
Mhm.
more or less doing what Wes Craven did with New Nightmare, just in a slightly different way, kind of more of a movie within a movie within a movie kind of way. And I think
Yeah.
that's potentially interesting. So the fact that he was exploring that for his final film, that's where I was able to get on board with that. I wasn't really keen on the idea of, I don't know, I guess I should be, because it sort of sounds contradictory to say that if Brad Pitt was going to come back as Cliff Booth, that didn't really interest me personally, only because we just saw the character. But if
Yeah.
that was meant to be part of the concept, then I can't really say that the concept is interesting if that's something that I didn't like about it, because it's kind of a contradictory statement. But yeah, long story short, I like the idea if this were to be Tarantino's final film. Although I did just rewatch Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 again. I would love his final film to just be Volume 3. I would just love to see Volume 3.
Just go back to that.
Oh.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Oh
Yeah.
man. So this is the perfect topic to bring me on because I've just been so angry about this all week.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw
People
some
are-
of the tweets. Yeah.
Because people are idiots. So Brendan, and I'm not lumping you in here, buddy. So don't never think that. But the
Mhm.
idea of like that he was gonna ever make Kill Bill 3 or the Star Trek movie or all
Oh,
these
the Star Trek
things.
movie was silly.
No, all these like he's talked about always wanting to make a Bond movie, like a sequel to on Her Majesty's Secret Service. He's talked about all these different things.
Yeah.
Because Quentin Tarantino has never shut up in his life. So he said so many ideas out loud, including this one. And I think I personally love the 10 movies and done kind of concept for him. I don't think it needs to be that for every director.
You're right.
But Quentin Tarantino, I mean, it's so funny how people got really angry about his notion of wanting only like 10 films and being done, and him trying to set a limit to himself when, like, if anyone should have a limit on how much they should do, is someone as maximalist as Quentin Tarantino. Like, this is a guy that's never been subtle for the most part in his career. Even in his rather more subdued work, there's still copious amount of needle drops.
There's still blunt force trauma.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff in it. You know, there's a ton of controversy that surrounds him. He is, though, one of the most bankable directors still on the planet, and he is a brand within himself. And so I think what Brendan you're saying is absolutely right. I think like him making a meta world tying connective final film was kind of what he's been doing throughout his filmography anyway, at little subtle hints of certain characters being in and around, you know, in the background, kind of almost like semi what Pixar does with their little hints that they do too.
Like the Vega characters specifically.
Yeah, like the Vega characters or like Polish, like the bride is buried in a cemetery and the last person's name is Schultz. Yeah. And then there's King Schultz played by Christoph Waltz. Like there's all these different ways they all connect. And that's just kind of the cool thing about it.
People have joked about that for years.
Yeah. And so like
that they're all
him actually than the Pixar theory, the QT theory sounds more interesting to me.
Him leaning into that, cool. Like good for him. It almost was like the way it was described, it felt more, and JD, I know you love this movie, I love it too. It felt more like good time vibes and fun. Like it felt more almost like Inherent Vice-esque from what I was gathering from this.
Okay.
And I think that his final great film is going to be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And I have only been proven right for the last 5 years about that, because that movie is incredibly well made and rewatchable and a go-to movie that I watched it on the plane a lot.
That is top 3 Tarantino for me.
So good, and it's aged well impeccably. And he's always talked about like this last movie being an epilogue to his career. So if he wanted to do that route, I think that's great. I like the idea of him working potentially with Tom Cruise. He almost did with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That never really, it sounded like that never actually was, that was just a rumor more than anything else. I think though, him scrapping this and wanting to deliver something to audiences that they think is, one, it's worthy that he wants to make. Yeah. And 2, worthy of the legacy of the movies that have come before. I think that that's okay. And there's, I mean, how many Guillermo del Toro projects do we hear him sign himself up for, and we've never seen those films? So this is only heightened because he's doing one at a time. Yeah. And you never know. He might pull this out and do a mini series on this down the road, or it turns into a book. You know, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was supposed to be a book, and then he loved it so much he adapted it into a screenplay, and then he went back and made it all out into a book.
Well, and didn't he say at one point, because of the leak of The Hateful Eight, he wasn't even going to bother making it, and then he ended up making it anyway?
Yeah, I mean, like rewrote it, but he
anyway. Yeah, he did like a whole thing, and people liked it, and he was like, oh, okay, screw it, I'll do it. And so, I mean, I'm bummed because I felt like this movie was going to come out next year, and I'm always jonesing to see the last one, and it's been 5 years since. But
what if he did that on purpose, though? What if he leaked it himself just to get people all wound up? like they've done in the past with him, and then he just comes out and does this anyway.
And he's just like, you know what?
Maybe.
Fuck it. I'm going to do it.
I just
You know
want
what
to
I mean?
see how people respond to this concept. Let's just put it out there, get some feelers, and then
Wait,
we'll
you
circle
think
back.
Quentin Tarantino would start a fire and then just walk away? Like, no, he'd never do that.
You know,
He's got his
never
own
do that.
brand
no,
of
we've
matches
never
right
seen
now.
him do that.
No, I think he's earned, honestly, the benefit of the doubt to do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
It's his films, it's his filmography, it's his art. We shouldn't be trying to police anybody on having to tell people how to do their own thing. I mean, like, people are weird because here's why.
Especially artists.
No, I'm not talking about, well, yes, definitely artists, but people are weird in what they want from creatives because
Oh yeah, it's
They
like they
want-
think they own the creative, right?
I
And
mean,
they,
like,
Yeah.
and they own
I
the
think
work that
another
they
great
make.
example was today was watching the reactions to the Mufasa trailer. And we're not going to go really into that like
Mhm.
fully, you know, you guys can talk about that, like, I guess when the movie comes out or whatnot.
Mhm.
But like, this is from a director that has been beloved. Like, Barry Jenkins is a beloved director. He's made masterpieces.
Yeah.
Quintessential works of the decade, a past decade, a television series that is incredible, in Underground Railroad.
Mhm.
And yet he
Mhm.
gets no benefit of the doubt because of a past movie's sins. And
That
when you
he-
watch
that was
this,
not connected to him.
that
at
was not
all.
connected, to him at all.
Mhm.
And then you look at this trailer and you're like, wow, these it actually looks like there's going to be more motion on these CGI creatures than before, but nobody cares because they've got their opinions laid out. It's almost eerily similar to, well, I don't want Greta Gerwig to make a Barbie movie.
Or a
Because I've already
Narnia
heard-
movie at this
Or,
point.
I
now.
mean, how many I've already started to see, like, God, does she really have to do a Narnia movie? And it's just
Yeah.
like, you mean the woman that just proved you all wrong when you were doing this when Little Women came out?
What
Like,
changed
it's-
that mindset? Because there was a time and place back when we were loving blockbuster filmmaking at a younger age, back when they were still, made by creatives in a creative way, where getting the big movie was actually celebrated. Right?
Yeah.
Remember that? Like the
Yeah.
idea of, Gore Verbinski, this guy that made Mouse Hunt, is doing a Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, that's cool. It's
Sam
Sam
Raimi's
Raimi's
doing a
making
Spider-Man
Spider-Man
movie?
movie.
See,
Peter
like-
Jackson's
Yeah.
doing Lord of the Rings. Like,
that was a celebratory moment for a lot of years back in the day, and
I
it's
mean,
not
you can-
anymore.
You can laugh about it now, although at least I have articulated my points in my defense of it. But that is how I felt about Michael Bay and Transformers too.
yeah.
Like I was such a Bayhead pre-Transformers, and Transformers, aside from Spider-Man, is the other franchise that I geeked out over as a kid. So when it was announced in 2007 that he was the one doing it, I was like, yes, absolutely. I celebrated the hell
Say
out
what
of
you
it.
will about those movies. They're still Michael Bay movies.
They're still Michael
I
Bay
mean,
movies. Absolutely.
Listen, I'm a massive hypocrite because because
That
I
much
love
we know.
I love Paul Thomas Anderson more than anybody on this planet.
Mhm.
He's my favorite director. And I've been watching all the little, like, behind the scenes stuff about, I guess he's making a Vineland adaptation or what. His more modern film that he's making.
Mhm.
And the stuff looks very like, oh God, this is on the line of, like, it's looking like Don't Look Up 2. You know what I mean? And it's scaring the shit out of me every day. But you know what? I have faith in a man who's given me some of the most memorable moments and transformative moments in on the big screen that I've ever seen in my life. Then I can go, okay, well, I'm sure there's a reason why they want to make this.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a reason why they want to either make this or they don't want to make this. And I would not want the last film from Quentin Tarantino, to circle back to this,
Yeah.
to be something forced that he didn't want to do.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think that, honestly, the way in which this started off sounded interesting about, like, it sounded like it was going to be about film criticism, right? And then it was about a guy that actually reviewed porno movies. And then it sounded like a revisionist history of film. Now it then sounded like a revisionist history of his own filmography. And
Yeah.
I actually want to commend Quentin Tarantino for restraining himself
Mhm.
and saying, you know what? This has kind of gotten out of hand. I'm going to take a step back and maybe find something else to do, because maybe I've done this already. And so, I mean, you can't win with a guy like Quentin Tarantino, because there is no winning with him. People hate him. They get riled up. You know, a movie that we all like, Hollywood's a movie we all love. And yet people, they pulled it apart, twisted it in all these different knots rather than take it at face value. And yeah, I mean, like, I just think that it's a good thing that he's not having to make a movie he doesn't want to make.
Yeah, I will say, while I completely agree with you there, Ryan, in that I really love Quentin Tarantino. I trust that whatever he's going to do, it's going to be something that we all love to some degree.
Right.
But part of me does wonder if this is manifesting from his own self-inflicted cap.
Yeah, his ego.
Because look, Quentin, I love you. It's okay if you do 11 movies. Got 12. God forbid 13. You could do 13. I know that's a weird number, but look, you can. It's okay. You can do 13 movies. It's perfectly fine if that's what you want.
You know what?
Do.
Let's make it 15. We like to work in fives. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Like,
just make your final movie like a 5-part thing and say it's like
that's
Movie Critic Volume 1, the Movie Critic Volume 2, the Movie Critic Volume 3. Because I mean, he himself calls Kill Bill one movie.
Well, he made it as one movie. He shot the whole thing in like one. It's not like Lord of the Rings where they shot it 3 separate, like they shot it all together, but they shot it 3 separate times for 3 separate movies. He shot it all at once, and then the producers, Harvey Weinstein, made him split it. And so there is a whole bloody affair cut out there. Yeah. He has it.
Does it reorder things at all?
I mean, this is what happens is the ending of Kill Bill doesn't exist, and you find out the reveal of her daughter and all that stuff with Bill in the third act
actual moments.
Moments.
So the moment between Bill and Sophie at the end of Volume 1 doesn't exist. Okay.
That was all added later in post and stuff. Yeah, they had that. And the beginning of Kill Bill 2 does not start that way as well either. Like that whole where she's like, I've driven this far, and it's just in black and white. And
basically, like the transitional points, but it's still, but it still follows with the wedding massacre rehearsal sequence.
Yeah. At any rate, that is to say, I do think that some of this pressure to make this final film, something to be remembered, whatever pressure he might be feeling, I do think that is self-inflicted. He doesn't have to cap himself at 10 movies. That being said, I do think this would have been really fascinating for a couple of reasons. One, we live in a day and age where we are seeing these connected universes. Yeah. And I think part of me wonders if he is taking that to subvert the traditional, connected universe thing with his own movies.
Critique it?
To critique it, perhaps.
There you go, Brendan.
Yes.
There you go.
I think he could have really done something fascinating with that idea, using his own filmography as the crux for that. Would have been really interesting.
You know who should star in the Movie Critic then if he ends up making it, if that is the case? The movie should star Quentin Tarantino.
Star himself, put himself back into the lead role.
Nobody was asking for that, Brendan. And
Quentin, if you're listening, don't get any ideas.
I know. Yeah.
Well,
again, he's trying. I like the idea of pulling it back. He's that's not pulling it back. That's going full deep in, and that's not good.
That's going to get people talking.
The other reason that would have made me very excited for that idea, not that he would continue necessarily the same tone, but what I really loved about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is that we got to see the more tender, poignant side of Tarantino that we had mostly seen in small chunks in his movies, but really came to the forefront in that film. And if he continued that reflective ethos into the Movie Critic, I think that would have been really great to see as he looks back at his own career in this reflective way that does connect all of his movies, and maybe in a more overt way, but would make sense given that context.
He's a dad now. You know, he's a
That's part of
dad.
it.
He's married. Like,
Changes
that's
you.
part of, I mean, like,
Yeah. it
what's
does.
really funny about him, not to bring this guy up, because I know that Jay has eliminated him from the planet for his like Robert Zemeckis Please Retire award. But George Clooney reminds me now of like why maybe there is a good idea to have a cap on being as a director, because like Clooney's making a bunch of like, I'll just call it, he's making a bunch of schlock. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
The Boys in the Boat, The Midnight Sky, the Tenda Ba, like these things that are not like
None of
nobody's
these
gonna.
movies even seem alike. Like
No,
you
no,
watch
none of
all of
these-
them, they don't. I don't. They don't even feel like they're directed.
They
by the
don't
same person to
exist.
me.
That's the thing. They fall in a category they don't exist. And I think that, I don't know, some directors, you know, some directors are going to make movies till the end of time. Like Nolan has talked about, probably the biggest director we have on the planet right now is Christopher Nolan. And he's talking about, there's always going to be something fascinating that I want to say. And that's great. We're going to have more Christopher Nolan films, and we'll probably have more PTA films, and we'll have Fincher, and we'll have these places for these people to be financed. Reading and knowing about Tarantino's kind of philosophy behind this is he's done making films, but that doesn't mean that he's done making art. And this guy's written screenplays before, and that other directors could do. He's talked about wanting to kind of go into more of the mini series route, which I think would actually be great. Like a movie like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood almost feels like you could take that idea and make it into a mini series. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So he's always been a massive fan of television. JD, I do think you are hitting on something though that was interesting, because he's a massive comic book fan. He really is. And so the idea of connective tissues throughout his filmography is very much of essence with comic book movies. And so, but I do also know that he hates the state of the industry and the way it's at. And I think that some way or another, he's going to make a commentary still within his final film about himself, about the industry, about Hollywood. There's no way it won't be about.
It'll be a meta thing in some way.
Yeah. Not like, I don't think it will be like, you know, Ruben Östlund or, you know, Adam McKay level of on the nose terrible.
No,
but I think,
Tarantino.
But I do think that there still will be a reverence for this, you know, of the Hollywood dream. You know what I mean? Because that's really there at the end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And I do think, and that's there in like Jackie Brown. I do think that will be kind of where he does have a, you know, he'll have maybe a couple things to say, but I do think it's going to be a very celebratory way out, you know?
Yeah. I do want to
much more than like shooting Hitler in the face. You know?
Yeah. I do want to transition to Rebecca here in a moment, but before we do, little counter argument to your point there, Ryan, about this potential trap that he could fall in, and you invoked George Clooney. And here's what I'll say about George Clooney. And I'm actually going to use sports as a reference point here. So apologies to those.
Yay,
that don't
sports.
watch
Sorry,
sports.
listeners, if you don't know what a sport is.
Yeah. The thing with a ball and a hoop.
In sports, there are advanced analytics, okay, that teams utilize to try to make their team better. And oftentimes what you'll hear with advanced analytics is that, you know, you might see this team do very well, and that momentum could carry them for a portion of a season. It could even go for a full season. But what the math will also suggest is that sometimes your team is not as good as the momentum suggests that it is. This winning that you're seeing on the surface, they might not be that good, and that eventually the math suggests that team will return to the mean. And that almost always happens. It always happens where a team will go on a heater. They might win some games, but then they start to slide, and eventually they return to the mean. George Clooney, I think, went on a heater at the beginning of his directorial career.
No shit.
I think it's very fair to say that he returned to the mean, in the sense that he was never a good filmmaker. Like what we've seen from him the last 5 years, 10 years, is that he's a subpar director.
He's just a dude.
That's who he is. He's just a dude. That's who he is. And I say that to say Quentin Tarantino, his mean has never been low. Like he has proven himself to be a championship contender. If you know what I mean, like his analytics suggest that he is great, that he doesn't slide, that he's just that good, that he's a championship contender. So to me, there's no evidence to suggest that if he goes on to make another 5 films that he's going to slide. It's just not there.
Well, I think though, even the great directors like Sidney Lumet or Billy Wilder or Howard Hawks, great directors that he reveres, the Palin Pressburger, they're Robert Altman. There's a ton of directors that aren't as prestigious or as squeaky clean as maybe a Spielberg, you know what I mean, or a Scorsese, and even some depending on who you talk to, there's some squeaky areas in between their filmographies because they've had like 20 films a piece.
Yeah, but they're kind of like but maybe not even one and done, but they come and go.
It's like one and off. Yeah, it's a lot like Tarantino. Like I think like
it's not like Robert Altman where his 80s filmography is where things got a little. It's like,
you're like, okay, all right,
it's like a whole period they had to come back from.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that he's such a historian of film that he knows to your point, JD, he knows that there is always it's actually the great thing of like an athlete. I actually think if he's more of like an athlete rather than a team. An athlete knows how many years they have in them to be great before they become average. And you can go out on top on your own terms and know that I was still, maybe I had a little bit left in the juice, but you got to know when to walk away, because then you're like Vince Carter and you're averaging like 6 points a game off the bench,
barely on the team.
Yeah. And your knees are killing you. And you're just like, that's not the Vince Carter I know. The Vince Carter I know is a high fly dunker, smooth talent, like Shaq going to Boston. Like, I don't remember Shaq going to Boston that way. I remember Shaq with the Lakers, right? And so I think
Jordan never played with
he never played with the Wizards. Like, we never talk about his years with the Wizards. No. Like LeBron, if he goes and like if he leaves the Lakers and he doesn't play well or whatever, like no one's gonna remember that. Nobody wants to remember that, right? And so I think that, and I don't think his filmography is perfect because I'm not like the biggest fan of like Death Proof. You know what I mean? I much prefer the other film in the grind. I like Planet Terror more of the Grindhouse films. But I think that he knows that it's like, okay, I'm going to leave them wanting a little bit more. And I have other things I want to do. And it doesn't mean that I can't make a 6-hour HBO Tarantino like television event would be kind of great. Like I would be like, cool, let him do it. Like let him explore that medium. And maybe then I think the thing is just like, and this could all render moot. What if we just like let him do this 10th movie and let him think that, and then the itch just comes back. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Which
let him go away for a little bit. And then it's like, maybe he gets to like his 70s and his kids are out of the house or, whatever. And he goes, maybe I want to do another one. You know what I mean? And I've got something. And that's where he goes, the movie critic. You know what I mean? Like, who knows?
My last point to all of this, I understand the idea behind the decision that eventually athletes fall out of their prime, directors fall out of their prime, they make bad movies. However, in almost every one of those instances, they have doubled, if not tripled, the amount of movies he's made. He's only made 9 movies, which is nothing. It's a handful comparatively to a Scorsese and Spielberg. Yeah, when you make 30 movies, your chances of making a bad one have skyrocketed.
That is more comparable to a PTA, honestly.
He's been very deliberate about what he does, and he's been very precise with his decision making in that. And as we even joked about earlier, sometimes he lets it out into the ether and then brings it back based off of that feedback. So I can't fully buy it because the evidence to me does not suggest that it's like those other directors and that he's still writing in his prime. If anything, he's Barry Sanders right now. He's just going to walk away at the peak of his career. We're going to go again on the other side of it.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of cool, but also too, I think he'll watch.
I've already experienced this twice. Yeah. With Barry Sanders and Megatron. Like, I've had enough. I need Quentin Tarantino to at least go down the backside of his career.
I get it, but also it goes back to this thing about like ownership of what we want over them versus what they want. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Like,
and I love Tarantino. I do speak selfishly in that regard for sure.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, like, I don't think he needs to cap himself.
We would miss him. Let's just say it. We'll miss him.
We would.
The world without
fears are overblown is all that I'm saying. Like, there's no evidence to suggest at this point anyway he's going to fall into those same traps.
And you know what?
But I understand him. But I think
we can give him all those facts, and at the end of the day, he's going to go, yeah. But I'm going to do it.
Oh, they would fuel him. That would fuel his fire. He'd probably make something even better if he knew that that's what we were saying about him.
Yeah, and so like I don't know. Whatever he does, he's I understand him. I get it. I understand what he wants to do. I've accepted it. See, that's the thing. Everyone's still trying to fight it. I've just accepted this. He's been talking about this since Django. Like, it's not something that he just came up with last week.
True. Yeah, that's
you know
true.
what I mean? So,
all right, let's talk about podcasting, Brendan. We do it.
Yeah, it's what we do.
We're doing it right now. We love it.
We are. Yeah. This is a podcast, right? We're talking. We're recording. We're going to release it live. That's a podcast. Yeah.
That's why we need to talk to you about Libsyn. Libsyn is a really great podcasting service. We have been using them since the beginning, since 2013. We absolutely love them. They currently host over 75,000 podcasts worldwide.
They're doing something right.
A combination of Liberated and syndication, and they're the podcast that you need, or the platform you need to go to if you are starting up a podcast. They, of course, have all of the statistics that you would want from a podcast. They can help you with optimization, whether it be with Apple Podcasts or Spotify, RSS compliancy, social media, whatever integration you need, they can make that happen for you. And they just make your life easier.
They make your show more marketable as well. They're the reason that you're able to get your shows on many different streaming platforms and accessible to everyone. I've had a lot of friends come up to me saying that they're thinking about starting some type of podcast, and it could be about anything. And they often ask, what do I do to get started? Sometimes I just say, Libsyn. Libsyn.com. That's all I say sometimes.
That's it. That's all you got to do. You go to Libsyn.com. That's Libsyn. Libsyn.com and get set up there, and they'll make it very easy and convenient for you. They have great customer service as well, which I very much appreciate. So go to Libsyn.com right now and sign up, and you'll get 2 months of podcasting for free with our code. And that code is ISF. Again, that code is ISF at checkout. And you'll get 2 months free. So go check them out. Again, that's Libsyn, Libsyn.com. And we thank them for their support. All right, Brendan, we need to talk about T-shirts. And
toys. Store toys.
I'm a little disappointed in myself. Although, for those watching on YouTube, you can see that I am wearing one of our T-shirts. I do love this one a lot. I wear it pretty frequently. However, I'm disappointed because I just put up a new T-shirt on our store. And it's the Amy Adams Arrival one that I've been talking about the last few weeks.
Speaks to you.
So that is up right now at our store that you can check out at InSessionFilm.com/store or go directly to TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/InSessionFilm. And you will see that new T-shirt there.
Yeah,
And,
it looks great. It looks great.
It's very exciting. I definitely urge everyone to go and check that out. I would love your feedback. But I actually do have 2 versions up there, so you can get it on either a dark T-shirt or a light T-shirt. So the styles work both ways. So you can go and check that out. And I love it. I really like my Arrival Amy Adams T-shirt. I wish that I was wearing it for those again watching on.
You've
YouTube,
worn it
but
before, though, right?
I
feel
have. I've worn it.
I've seen
times,
it in a few videos before.
Yeah. So so you can go check that out. Again, the Arrival one specifically, it's Amy Adams with the circular alien like logo
Language,
thing.
language,
The language, yeah. And it has the phrase, "Despite knowing the journey and where it leads, I embrace it and I welcome every moment of it." One of the best lines from that movie and really of that whole decade.
I was gonna say chills down your spine, right?
Chills every single time. So you can go and check that out. But we also have Stop Turning Art into Sports, as we've talked about here on the show before. We got Dune inspired. We got a whole La La Land Moonlight T-shirt if people want to go and check that out as well. All kinds of fun things.
Yep. And I think CGI soup will be the next theme.
That we'll have to figure that out. Yeah, we're going to talk about that here very soon as we get into blockbusters. But
yeah,
CGI soup might be the next one. We'll have to see if we can figure out a design for it. But we've talked about it a lot over the years.
we have.
So.
Yeah, it's becoming a recurrent thing on this show.
Again, that's InSessionFilm.com/store or go to tpublic.com/stores/InSessionFilm. And for everyone that gets a T-shirt, we thank you for your support. Okay, with all of that said, let's go ahead and transition to our Best Picture movie series. We are starting in the 40s for the next 10 weeks, which is very exciting. So we're starting off with Rebecca, the Alfred Hitchcock film from 1940, directed by, of course, Alfred Hitchcock, and starring Laurence Olivier, Joan Fontaine, Judith Anderson, George Sanders, among others that come and go throughout the movie. If you are not familiar with Rebecca, it is about a self-conscious woman adjusting to her new role as an aristocrat's wife and avoiding being intimidated by his first wife's spectral presence. All right.
I love the way you make these plot synopses sound even more haunted than they probably have any right
Hell
to be.
yeah.
Got to bring something to it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll start with you, Ryan. What did you think about Rebecca?
It's, it's a good movie. Good movie.
That's why he was here.
Good movie.
Good movie.
I love this movie. I think it's I'm gonna just spoil this. Maybe this is jumping ahead. Maybe it's jumping the shark. This is one of my 10 favorite Best Picture winners of all time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love it.
Okay.
I think that this movie is it's one of those movies that you watch and it's, if you can, how we talk about movies are very influential. And obviously a lot of what Hitchcock does is very influential. And this is his transition at this time from the British sort of, studio system to the American studio system. And this was like the Academy and everybody really embracing him. He had this in Foreign Correspondence in the same year, and they were both nominated for Best Picture. And it was the year of Hitchcock. When
he came of age.
What was so interesting was watching it this time, and we just did a episode over at AwardsWatch on the podcast feed. We just did like sexiest movies and horniest movies that are our favorites, and then we talked about challengers, and we just talked about also within love there is repression of love, and there is there's guilt, and there's forbidden temptation and all this, and then there's angst, and that's what like a lot of those sort of ideas simmer around this movie of naivete, of yes, a haunting figure that surrounds it, but then what happens when the idea of love is kind of floated around around the spectrum, and then it turns for some into an obsession both in terms of the physical and then in terms of the materialistic. Like Mandalay as a place is its
The star of
own
the movie.
is the star of the movie. It's its own creature. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's like, this is like, that's the real monster. It's not actually Rebecca. It's the totality of what she's built at Mandalay is what's really the obstacle for Joan Fontaine in this film, along with, of course, Laurence Olivier's, Maxim just is essentially, he's still under the thumb of this figure that is foregone. And we see it right from the beginning when he's on the cliff. It's intimidation at its finest, and it's a chess match of who has control. I was reading a lot about obviously movies that are kind of very similar to this, and I was thinking about how this would get cast if we did a modern film, because the Ben Wheatley film doesn't exist. And
I never even saw it. I didn't even see it.
I
it's
haven't
terrible.
seen it either. Yeah.
It's terrible. It's just, it's so dry. Like that's the thing about that movie. It's so serious and it's so dry. This movie is like darkly funny at times too, just because of the way the reactions are, or the sort of the dialogue and the way it like ping pongs off of characters.
There's an awkwardness to it, especially given how Joan Fontaine is just so
Yeah,
like a fish
there's
out of water in a lot of ways.
Exactly. And she's there's that scene of where she's at the lunch table with his friends or whatever, and and Max's friend basically says like, well, what does your wife even really do? You know what I mean? And he says it right to her face. And then of course he faux pas and says like, well, thank God you're not into sailing, because like that's literally, or boating, because that's like how Rebecca died.
Yeah.
And the whole room just kind of like, you could hear a pin drop. But yeah, I mean, this movie's, there's so much meat on this bone when you watch it. I mean, we will talk about Mrs. Danvers, who is one of the more fascinating characters ever that Hitchcock has brought to screen. And yeah, I think Hitchcock's uses of shadows throughout this entire film, and the way that the cinematography by George Barnes, it's incredible work. If you guys watch it, the map paintings that are in and around and behind them to show the vastness of Mandalay, but it's still, you can feel the confines of 1940s cinema.
Yeah.
It's remarkable filmmaking. It's watching Hitchcock is like watching a magic trick every time. But watching this one, it just feels so urgent, and there's a little bit of dirtiness to it that I kind of really like about it as well.
Yeah.
And so not like dirty and like perverse, but like dirty as in like
just kind of unclean.
Yeah, there's people that are of servants or of a certain manner, they've got a lot of blood and dirt on their hands. They're not afraid to get a little rough there, So
Sure.
it's a great movie. I love it.
I can only imagine even in 1940, when people saw this for the first time, it would have felt like a pretty daring and bold statement.
It's kind of scandalous for a 1939, 1940 film. It's like when you're watching it, it's like, geez, they really went for it, huh?
Yeah. And I know I haven't read the source material, but I know its author, Daphne du Maurier.
Yes,
that's
correct.
how you pronounce her name.
I could have helped you there, but I just wanted you to struggle.
But she's sort of known for that. Her work is known for that as well. I know that she also wrote the source material for the film Don't Look Now, so that's another example of that. And that is Birds. The Birds, she was the primary story arc for that too. So, and there's always something kind of unclean about her films. Like, you're watching something you shouldn't be. It's peeling this like psychological onion back to reveal the worst tendencies of people. Yeah. And I think that's what makes the film so fascinating. I really like this movie as well. I don't think I quite like it as much as you, Ryan, as far as it being like one of my very favorite Best Picture winners. And if I were to rank Hitchcock's filmography, there are other films I would certainly put above this. In many ways, it most reminds me of Vertigo. And it kind of does feel like a trial run for Vertigo in some ways, especially in those first two thirds.
Those are my two movies. for
Oh, they
Hitchcock.
are. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Okay.
that's those are
Vertigo's one. Vertigo's
my
Like,
favorite.
yeah.
Psycho's probably my
Vertigo's-
number 2,
same.
if I'm being honest.
Psycho's like 3. Yeah,
It's
those are
it's
my
so
top
good,
3.
so good. But there's so much about what Rebecca's doing that remind me a bit of the obsessive qualities of Vertigo, like the costuming of it. When I say costuming, I don't mean like the time period aesthetics or the literal costume design of the film. I mean the fact that we're trying to turn some main character into someone that she is not. And Joan Fontaine here is kind of put into this position of comparison, and she has to try and live up to Rebecca's reputation. And I found that so intriguing watching it again through that lens. And I think Hitchcock does a great job kind of maintaining this ugliness that we're talking about, but also the like the gothic sensibilities that were probably there in the source material as well. It's such a well-made film. There's a ghostliness and a lushness that permeates throughout the entirety of it. And with the matte paintings and all these other things, that just from a filmmaking standpoint, it's kind of astonishing how well it still looks, considering that it's one of Hitchcock's earlier works. For a film from 1940 that is 84 years old at this point now, it really does look quite stunning the way it's all put in place. And he lingers on shots and large scale sets for a while. So it almost has a play like lived in kind of vibe. So I really do like this film. And I think I appreciate it more as a representation of Hitchcock and his journey as a filmmaker. I don't know if I love every choice it makes narratively. We'll get into some of those things, and I'm sure JD may have some of that on his notational docket in front of him. There are a few things I might question, at the very least, I'll say, but we'll get to those points. But I think as a filmmaking experience, as a performative experience, especially from Joan Fontaine and Judith Anderson, I think it is.
Yeah.
It's a very riveting and interesting movie for its time.
Okay. So before people get mad at me, Ryan, I ask for your patience. Just bear with me and hear me out. Even if you vehemently disagree with me, that's fine. I'll start off by saying I do really like the film. I do really like it. The first 2/3 are especially excellent. I know people are split on Joan Fontaine, generally speaking, but how she emulates the constant weight of comparison in Mrs. De Winter is spectacular. Absolutely incredible. There's a heartbreaking nature to her character that I think carries weight because of her performance, and it's mostly her non-vocal work that's affecting. Her eye and facial mannerisms in this film are spellbinding. She does a great job of exhibiting this innocence and inexperience in those early scenes when she's working for Mrs. Van Hopper that is then exploited in the back half of the film, as you guys are talking about, most notably from Mrs. Danvers. And I think Fontaine gives the character a genuine pathos that I find ravishing, because the film primarily works as a psychological and romantic character study that examines a young woman constantly drowning, pun intended, in feeling inadequate.
Yeah.
However, what keeps me from loving the film is that it makes this drastic turn in the final third that honestly I find a little baffling. I've never read the novel, so I assume the source material is the major culprit, but its final revelations I do think are convoluted emotionally and frustratingly jarring. The screenplay goes from being this emotionally driven character study to a murder mystery in the blink of an eye, and it's quite weird. It's a complete change in narrative structure and point of
Love
view.
the way you said that. It's quite weird.
It completely changes structure and point of view, and it's just not nearly as compelling to me. As you noted, Brennan, we'll talk about it more as this conversation goes, but I did find myself at a distance, partially because the first 2/3, what came before, is so great, is so exuberant, that the turn into being the murder mystery, it's just strange to me. It's still a very good movie on the whole. You'll hear my voice within the choir of praise, even if I'm not singing quite as loudly as everyone else. That's how much I do love those first 2/3. And then there's Hitchcock's filmmaking as, you're talking about there, which is just remarkable, absolutely remarkable. I echo everything you had to say there. So for me, it really just comes down to the narrative choices. That's the only reservation I have here, but it's strong enough that it keeps this from being certainly one of my top 5 Hitchcock films.
Yeah. Well, you're wrong. But
I knew you were gonna say that.
no, I'm just kidding. No, I get it. I understand it. Though I think within the rules of this society, it makes sense. Like, it makes sense in that it's not a grand inquisitory sort of, like, it doesn't become a full-on courtroom. It's still well contained within as much hush hush within everyone as it could be. It's like it's very contained within this small little community, this world, and also it's about these people too, then about essentially that Mandalay and everything that's gone on there, and what Rebecca's built is she's got the whole town on her side. You know, they talk about these parties, they talk about these events, they talk about how open her home was, and then
she's Gatsby. She's basically the Great Gatsby.
Well, I mean, she's Gatsby mixed with the Amazing Amy from Gone Girl.
That's
That's what she is. She is this person that has, as Maxim describes her, she has manipulated her way into a marriage of circumstance, and then her real love has then not been her husband, but been the excess that she has created and the image that she has provided those of the world around her. Everyone speaks about her with this reverence, but what she actually is a deeply, and we never see her outside of a painting, and we barely hear, we only know of her name, and we don't have any flashbacks whatsoever. I think it's a brilliant move by Hitchcock. I think it's a brilliant storytelling decision to never like just go back and show all that. It's allowed those. I love that. Because it's allowing everyone to interpret this person to how they were, and then later the revelations of who they really are, and how they then can justify any of those actions with any resemblance of the gray to themselves. And I think that that's a really interesting way of doing it. Yeah. And by their accounts, by most people's accounts in this film, I mean, it is to assume that she was not the most stable of human beings, and by and a very manipulative person in terms of the tools that she would use at her disposal. And so I think that Maxim's revelation about his wife, still even after she's passed and she is gone and everything, when her boat and body is found, he is terrified, because he knows the kind of pain that she can inflict psychologically on his life and everyone around her. And then when even they're done with the trial, which I think is a great touch, when he's by the car before he drives home to Mandalay, when it was revealed about, not the pregnancy, but essentially using a pregnancy to even entrap him more into this. And trapping him into essentially his demise of his life, because he would, she's trying to get him to kill him, to destroy him. I find that to just be really heartbreaking, really fascinating. It's, it's one of the most fascinating characters in film history that we never ever see on camera. It's and I think
love that idea. I do.
It's such an interesting idea from this being, I mean, you talked about it, Brendan. This is more of the psychological horror that Hitchcock, that I even gravitate.
It's a gothic romance. It really is.
It is. It totally is, because that place is terrifying. I mean, what Danvers does throughout the way she manipulates Joan Fontaine throughout this entire film, the way that she is so close in conversation and breathing upon her down her neck with details.
Yeah.
It's very much the same way, and how it kind of suffocates her. The idea of becoming the new Mrs. De Winter is then the same face we see Maxim, like when they discover and tell him the news that her body's been found, and how terrified they both have felt. And that's how this romance comes to be. I think that the parallels of how Hitchcock is able to use the fish out of water story to then tie it in with this overall horror show that's going on this very prestigious and beautiful, lavish place. Yeah, it's kind of, it's great.
It reminds me a lot of stories like The Beguiled, for instance, the Sofia
Yeah.
Coppola film. Or if we want to take it back even further, I know this is based on its own author, but I was also thinking a lot about the works of Nathaniel Hawthorne, something like The Scarlet
Yes.
Letter, for instance, which has not necessarily a gothic sensibility, but more of a witchy sensibility, even if it's not directly about that. Although, if I remember, I think Hawthorne was born in Salem, Massachusetts, so it does kind of make sense if that is the case. But it does have that tone, and the film maintains that tone, which is why I don't necessarily mind that we are then given this sort of villainous reveal, this sort of murder mystery plotline that you're talking about there, JD, because I think the film tonally was always building to some kind of big thing happening. So I was always ready for it, even when I saw the film for the first time. And I love the idea that it's basically telling us that the person with the best reputation may also have the worst reputation.
She's built the breadcrumbs to those moments.
Yeah.
Because even long after she's gone, she hates him. So she has built that. She's resentful of him as well too. She's going to get him one way or another. Like it's so twisted. It's messed up.
Yeah, it is. I think the thing I question the most, and maybe this translates a bit to some of your reservations as well, JD, I think it mostly comes down to one scene, which is kind of my maybe biggest reservation, and it is the moment Maxim reveals everything to the new Mrs. De Winter, which honestly I feel like just comes at the most convenient and most opportune time. And I'm not sure if the film did the work to justify how Maxim was ready to reveal all of that information. It honestly it felt more like a convenience for the audience than it does a convenience for the character. And maybe this is also on Laurence Olivier's performance, which was in many ways kind of a red herring. His performance is kind of a red herring because it's meant to straddle two things. Is he a grief-stricken person, or does he have some other agenda to hide? Like, is he actually complicit in something maybe murderous in some way? Like, there's almost like this untrustworthiness in Maxim in a lot of ways. And I think he sells that portion a lot harder than the other. So it almost kind of felt like a trickery kind of thing to me. And that's what makes that reveal, that transition point, a little awkward for me. I think that's it. So it might not necessarily be the murder mystery third act itself. I think it's the transition from gothic romance to that I don't love. And that's kind of the thing I'm a little torn on there.
Yeah, for me, it's not so much a tone thing. I think Hitchcock does a great job of being consistent there. For me, it does come down to the narrative choices and even more specifically structure. Because from those opening scenes, everything we see is from Joan's perspective. And I'm going to call her Joan because that's easier to say. But it's from her perspective.
She doesn't even have her first name, does she?
She doesn't,
That's what's
which
so
is why I'm
interesting
going to
about
call
the
her
movie.
Joan.
Yeah.
It's all about her loneliness and desires, which again is emphasized most prominently in Fontaine's performance more than what's there on the page. It's vividly clear that Hitchcock wanted that to be expressed with this extreme cogency. She has no family to speak of. She doesn't have any affinity to Mrs. Van Hopper. It makes sense that she would cling on to Maxim's efforts to be with her, even if there's a massive contrast between the two and you're not entirely sure of Maxim's motives. But that's what makes the film so psychologically captivating. We empathize with Joan. We understand why she chooses Maxime. Yet even after being married and moving to Manderley, her loneliness doesn't disappear. If anything, it heightens. It becomes interwoven with this constant comparison and feeling inadequate. She's haunted by the ghost of Rebecca, as everyone else seems to be. And boy, does Fontaine emulate that exquisitely. As a psychological and emotional character study of a young woman marrying into something that might be over her head, it is remarkably enchanting for
Oh, yeah.
a lot
And-
of the reasons you guys are
Yeah.
saying. Honestly, Ryan, as you spoke there after my opening thoughts, I didn't really disagree with anything you said. There are very, very few moments here, if any, where the point of view shifts from Joan in the first 2/3 when it's about her. So why the sudden shift? It makes no sense. I get that Hitchcock wanted to make a faithful adaptation. I just find those revelations to be, one, underwhelming, and two, undermining the progression of Joan, because it takes away from her point of view, which the film had been exclusively from her perspective.
And it turns Maxim
the
into kind of the main
ghostly-
character then.
Well, and the ghostly element you're talking about, I think, are an incredible nuance to that perspective that she feels. So like all of those revelations we get near the end, Maxim kind of spouting all of this exposition to us, and then we get to the courtroom, like I found most of that to be redundant. I feel like we could sense some sort of gravitas, something to that effect, even without us being told explicitly what it is, because it's there in the performances. It's there in Hitchcock's filmmaking. Like I didn't need to be told directly, this is what it is. And
the
shift to me just, it takes something that I thought was psychologically harrowing and makes it overtly plain and less compelling.
So just to make sure I understand, so you're suggesting that what you were able to get from the film in the first 2/3, the performances, and especially Hitchcock's direction, you were able to get the sense of where this film was going to go narratively, just given those things. Like you knew Rebecca was.
I'll give you two examples.
Because I don't agree, and I'm curious about that.
I'll give you two examples. So there's a scene where Maxime is showing Joan the pictures, the moving pictures from their honeymoon. And Joan compares herself to Rebecca and mentions that she doesn't want to create gossip, is what she says, implying that there's lots of gossip around Rebecca. Maxime gets really upset. You see Joan recoil in the moment, immediately regrets her words, again emulating how inadequate she feels. Her next move goes back and turns Maxime's next move goes back and turns on the moving pictures, and it's just this scene of the two of them cuddling and looking peaceful, which is this incredible juxtaposition that suggests, again, the inadequacy of Joan, but that there's something stirring in Maxime. There's something dark simmering there, something sinister simmering there that we don't really need to know. It's just his reaction to
That
the
part
word
I agree
gossip.
with.
Or I think about the scene when they go for a walk and she innocently, again, emphasizing that word, innocently goes to get the dog, and Maxime freaks out. He makes her feel extremely foolish for doing something affable. And yes, that is there on the page. I will give credit to the screenplay. There's enough there on the page in terms of manifesting that psychological nuance and that volatility for sure. But it's especially there in the performances that, without the film telling us directly, and to your point, Ryan, through other characters, we come to understand that Rebecca had a reputation, that she was revered at this place. But because of Maxine, it does seem to suggest that, okay, there's something there that's also not great. Like, before he even reveals to us what had happened, I feel like I already knew that duality in Rebecca. And so, like,
that's interesting.
I didn't need.
Well, I didn't know.
For
Yeah.
that, because it's there in those other scenes.
I always got the sense that when I saw the movie for the first time, which was, I think, sometime maybe like in 2016, maybe 2017, my first thought was, oh, Maxim is just a murderer. Like, that was my whole thought the whole time. So that's what made the reveal more surprising to me. Like, I don't know if the first 2/3 make it very clear that Rebecca is the one sort of puppeteering these things, or was always the one, and that Maxim is really just a grief-stricken victim in all of this. I always got the sense, at least my first time seeing it, was that the movie's trying to point to him as some type of culprit in this. So like, I never caught on to those pieces specifically. So the reveal itself was always surprising to me. I just don't know if I like the way it was revealed. Like it just like the convenience of that data dump of information in that shed was a little too timely for me, if that makes sense.
I think that, so a couple of things. Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. Is when I see it, I see it a little bit differently now, Brendan, because I've seen the movie so many times.
Sure.
I see every time I see Max when we first meet him, because he is very, I mean, JD, to your point, he's like that even at the first shot of the film on the cliff, right? And there's this unedginess within their first interaction. I think of it as, yes, a grief-stricken person, but also someone that wants to forget, is trying so desperately to forget how he got here to the first place. I mean, he keeps saying it. I should have never gone back to Mandalay. We never should have come here, because even trying to move on, I can't. Not because of how she died or the circumstances, or just the fact of, if it was just a regular, normal circumstance of grief, you would want to move on and not be reminded of the person that died in your life.
Yeah.
Add then the juxtaposition of the psychological warfare that this woman played on him, both not just within his own home, but within his own community and with his name. Like, you don't want anything to do with her. And I know why he gravitates towards, his new wife, the new Mrs. De Winter, Joan Fontaine, is because she's the complete antithesis to a person like Rebecca, and that she is innocent, and he is drawn to that. He likes that she is, like, all of his friends, all of their community, every one of their workers thinks that she's simple, but he prefers that because that means she's innocent. That means that they have a chance at maybe happiness that he never got to have before. And I think the reveal, Brendan, while as timely, maybe within the moment of, like, literally after, everyone's searching and everything, things could get discovered, and it's the only opportunity left before that they might be alone. And so I think that that's where it all crumbles, because at that point, it's like, I have kept up everything. He's not even himself anymore. He's back to, like, because he's just like, oh yeah, your costume, I got mad at it. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I totally forgot about it, because it's furthest thing from his mind now, because he's now having to then, what he thought was a thing that's far gone from him. What he says there is perfect, where he says, well, we had our shot, didn't we? Like, we essentially, we had our chance to be happy, and she wouldn't allow it to happen. The main character of this movie isn't Joan Fontaine. It isn't Laurence Olivier. Main character of this movie is the titular character that we never see here. And that's why I think the first half of the film, then moving it over to the second half of the film, I think that this is how I always interpret it. Maybe you guys think of it differently.
Sure.
And maybe it's a cop-out, and I don't care, because I think it's great. The reason why is we're just positioned on what Rebecca has done at Mandalay and how that affects Joan Fontaine. And in the second half of the film, we are just posed on what Rebecca has done to Maxime, and how he has to suffer the consequences for this, and how he has to sort of pay and have to survive at all the work that she has kind of done, both not intentionally against who is going to be the next person there, just at the reputation that she has created. And then, yes, to Maxim, it's definitely more pointed in the second act of this film, in the second half of this film. It's much more because of what had gotten to those events that allowed her to be on those boat and that body to be found. But I don't think that the whole film is like her literally, like, it's tied that neat in a bow of her, like, I knew he would marry this woman, and I knew she would, like, I'd screw up her life, and I told Mrs. Danvers to do that. No, it's what she's psychologically done to someone like Danvers, to someone like the staff, to their friends, the impression that they've left, that then builds this heap of gossip and doubt. Like, the idea of gossip, right, has bled through this town now. And when the coroner goes to Maxim, he's like, I'm so sorry that you have to live through all this again. You know what I mean? Like, you have to go through this, and hopefully it's not that bad, but it's going to be when salacious things happen. And then, of course, the idea of obsession, which is a big component of this movie. the idea of obsession
Hitchcock staple right there.
being within Mrs. Danvers and being the downfall again, and almost continuing the traumatic pain that Rebecca was causing now on to not only Joan Fontaine, but then potentially Laurence Olivier through her testimony, which is a fantastic scene. And how she really does technically try to hold as much power as she can before realizing she didn't have any at all, before realizing her perception of Rebecca is also a broken perception as well too, and then leading to her ultimate demise in the end. I think it's just a brilliant way of doing a story like this that, like, I mean, we see this done so many times, these Gothic movies. I was seeing this. I always watch this interview of like this director roundtable from the 2017 directors and the best director nominees. And Del Toro talks about how PTA was very inspired by this film to make Phantom Thread. And of course, Crimson Peak was very inspired by this movie too. And as I was watching it, my wife Megan, she looked at me and she went like, I can understand what Del Toro was going for, but he just didn't nail it, did he? You know what I mean? It's like it's just there's something inherently
no down talk on Crimson Peak. That movie rocks.
She
just said there's just something inherently sinister behind every turn, every edit. This movie's immaculately edited. When you really look at it,
very well made movie.
Through just the technical aspect of it, it has to be that precise. And it has to be that way also too, because of who Rebecca was as a person as well too, a little bit. So I think it's, but I understand all your kind of your frustrations or your just maybe disappointments and how certain aspects are. But I think over time, like for me, I've just understood them reading the source material and seeing this, and then also seeing the atrocity that is the remake from 2020. Like the choice, this movie moves at such a pace that even in those moments that like are lesser, I forgive a lot of it because it's just so damn entertaining as well too of a film.
If I can speak to that real quickly, because I think maybe, and I did mention this in my opening thought, so I guess to reiterate that the disparity here might simply come down to the art of adaptation.
Yeah,
I think the ghostly presence of Rebecca and how that trickles into all of these things probably works extremely well in the novel, because you have all that time to explore the effects of Rebecca on all of these various things. But that's not what this film does. The first 2/3 of this film is from Joan's point of view. We never, ever leave her point of view. And so all we see is the ghostly presence of Rebecca, which again is vividly haunting. I agree with you there, Ryan. Like the effects of Rebecca on Manderley and especially on Joan, how that manifests through this inadequacy that she feels, this constant weight of comparison, and how that is formed in the performance, I think is extremely great. Like as a psychological character study, I think the film is working on all cylinders. The first 2/3 of the film, I think, are perfect. Especially when you include Hitchcock's filmmaking and the technical precision of the film. I totally agree. But I think as a film, obviously a different medium, it's really challenging to have your cake and eat it too. And I think that's where the final third of this film does struggle for me, because Hitchcock wants to tell a faithful adaptation, which includes having those revelations and showing us how Rebecca infiltrates into all of these things. But the bulk of the film had not been about them. It had been about Joan and how she is affected by it all. So to me, it's that's why I said the shift is weird, because it is a very, very strange turn to being a murder mystery all of a sudden, when it had been vividly explicitly this character study for the majority of the film, which I think is excellent again. And to speak to something you said earlier too about Maxim here, and I very much do agree. I think maybe Laurence Olivier and his performance is perhaps what I really love about the character, because I do agree there is this dolefulness in the character. And maybe that's why I didn't feel what you did, Brendan, because I did sense a man that is certainly regretful, perhaps in some sort of mourning. But then we also get that moment where he talks about how he hates her. But even before you get to that moment, you knew that something sinister was bubbling because of these outbursts he has toward Joan. But then he would always come back. He would recoil in the moment, but then understand what he had done, and he shows Joan this empathy. So there's this volatility in the character that suggests that something terrible had happened, and that to me makes a big difference. So when he gives us the revelations of what happened, I honestly didn't mind that as much, because again, even in that moment, it's still like Joan is still the point of view, and she's hearing this information for the first time, which is why we're hearing this information for the first time. It's mostly after that where it becomes a courtroom drama and this murder mystery thriller and who died and who murdered. And like that to me is where it's all of a sudden structurally a very different movie. It is not at all tethered to what came before. Tonally, yes, Hitchcock tonally makes it work,
He
but
sets it up
structurally and narratively, it's not. It's very different. And that does take me out of the movie, especially because Joan's perspective is what had drawn me to it, and how she reacts to the ghostly sinisterness of it all. And then I could also talk about Mrs. Danvers and how she plays a part of that. She's the one that revered Rebecca, so that's also a clue.
There's the other obsessive quality there that was so fascinating. There's a moment where if you end this movie, it's actually a very fascinating movie in and of itself. If you end this movie on the line with Joan saying, I'm Mrs. De Winter now. Like if you just end it there, that's a very fascinating.
Yes, love it. Curtains raised, A+.
Well, and watching her, take more ownership as I'm now the wife of this household. It's my job to do this. It's something weirdly cathartic about that because of how compelling Joan Fontaine is. Pardon me, that I do find that interesting. The more I think about this, and I keep trying to trace my steps back to when I first saw the movie and why I still really liked it at the time, and I still really like it now too, but maybe where I was having some similar reservations, but maybe in a different way, it might sound kind of like blasphemy, but I think my biggest problem with the movie is Laurence Olivier's performance.
Really?
Because like the more I think about it, I'm trying to think back to my first time seeing it and how I was perceiving things. If I go back to the scene in the boathouse between Maxim and Joan, and when that revelation comes that we're talking about here, even as he's spilling the beans about who Rebecca was and what this was, my first thought was, I don't believe you for a second. I still don't trust you. And I felt that throughout much of it, which made those final moments in the courtroom and how it was starting to basically confirm all of his notions. I thought, that's kind of underwhelming to me now, because I felt like your performance was suggesting still, even to this point, untrustworthiness. And
I think that is the case. Honestly, I think that is the
then
case.
I think that's a problem with the movie then.
Maybe it is. Like, I do like the duality that I mentioned earlier, like this volatility, like these outbursts he has toward Joan, but you do sense the dolefulness in the character. To speak to what you're saying, though, I do think it is kind of funny. We're talking about a film from 1940, and we've already revealed spoilers, so I guess any more spoiler alerts. But
no warning here.
It's like 85. This movie's like 85.
But it's just really
84
funny
years
to me,
old. Yeah,
because this film changes the death of Rebecca from being a murder in the novel to it being an accidental death because of the Hays Code. That's why they had to make that change, was because of the Hays Code. However, he still, despite the change, he still covers up the death and he scuttles the boat. There's he admits that himself. And there's still a shadiness to that. Like, that's still very dubious behavior.
And maybe the film kind of lets him off the hook a little too
I think
easily.
so. Like, I think
shouldn't that be
does.
kind of the point of the movie? And maybe it is. Maybe I'm not sensing like some conversation we're supposed to have about that in that way.
And again, this is my problem in terms of the narrative structure, because I do think this is where the film does lose out on that momentum, because it's not about any of these things. But the court deciding that it was a suicide, that does not negate his choices to cover up the murder and scuttle the boat, which the film doesn't really wrestle with, but those things are still true about the character.
That's an interesting idea to sort of tie him back to these sort of contradictory, hypocritical, and cynical sort of behaviors of high society that Rebecca herself embodied. And if he was a victim in all this, is he kind of doing the same thing now?
Yeah.
That's an interesting idea. And I feel like we're talking about it here, so maybe the film is doing its job in stimulating that conversation, but at the same time, I feel like we're also trying to reach for that. Like, I'm not sure if the film is like really inviting that conversation, or if it really is on its mind at all.
I don't think it explores that very well, and maybe it does in the novel. Because to your point, Ryan, not only do we see the effects of Rebecca on Joan, even though that's most of the movie, we do see it on these other characters, including Maxim. And I think part of that dubiousness there that we're talking about here, even though the film doesn't examine it all that well, I do think part of why he scuttles the boat and covers up the death is because he knows that the ghost of Rebecca is going to haunt him. Yeah. And it does haunt him. That's why he makes those choices.
Maybe it's his own fault.
Film, and again, I understand that's probably there in the novel, and it's probably more thorough in the novel. But this film is not really about Maxim. Like, he's gone through a half of this movie because he's out doing business stuff. Like, the perspective of this film is from Joan, and leaving that perspective to become a murder mystery, I don't know. It doesn't really work for me.
This is an interesting movie.
it's interesting. Like, I want to agree with you, Ryan, because those ideas on paper are inviting. They're fascinating. I just don't think in execution, it just isn't there for me. Again, the turn is weird. But everything with Joan, I think, is excellent.
Yeah. No, I think also, to me, I think with Maxim, who, I mean, like, anytime Laurence Olivier just wants to like drive me around in a car and like sweep me off my feet, go right on ahead.
So not Morgan Freeman. You'd rather it be Laurence Olivier?
No, because she at least sits in the front seat with him. Morgan Freeman would make me sit in the back, and I'm not about that. I'm not a backseat driver.
I'm going to join Cliff Booth. That's who I'm doing.
There you go. I do think that the one thing that it could have done, and I think this is what you guys are kind of alluding to, which is how his traumatic pain, how he's inflicting this on Joan Fontaine, right? And how essentially I would have loved to see a little bit more of that. I do think that they try to subtly hint at that, because I think that he does feel a little bit of, every time he blows up and then he kind of realizes that he's blowing up because of Rebecca. He's not blowing up because of really anything she's doing. He's doing it because of his wife.
It's the haunting nature, for sure.
Yes. And he realized, and every time he's very regretful, I think he is there's a little bit of understanding there of, I've brought you into this and I shouldn't have. And this is,
he tells her twice that it was selfish of him to do so.
Yeah, it was very selfish. And I do love that about it as well, because it is interesting about someone being drawn or being forced in a trap, and then having the only way to crawl out is having someone drag down there with them. And I think that's a trope that is kind of built from this movie, that is used throughout the gothic romance or the psychological thriller that we see in modern contexts in movies of that nature, of this nature. And I do think that by the end, when everyone is searching for the body, and he should be out there, right, searching for the body of his dead wife or what's coming on shore of his house, he's very well aware of that, and he's aware. And I think that that's when the revelations, it's at a certain point, it's just going to all flow out. He can't hold it in within anymore. He can't contain it, and he says it. And I think that's where there could have been maybe, it always comes in three, certain things of like this nature. And also we're getting on a movie that's made in 1940. So I always give that a little bit of a caveat as well. But I think that there could have been more to relay the point of how regretful he was in essentially doing what Rebecca did to him in a lot of ways, because we see her pain. Like, we see her literal pain of what Danvers is creating upon her. It's consuming her. It's anxiety. It's perfectionism. It is chasing a goal or a ghost that she will never be able to chase. It's unobtainable. And it's fascinating to watch. And it's fascinating to just see. I mean, honestly, the performance of this movie is Judith Anderson, if we're really going to talk about performances, because what she does as Mrs.
really
Danvers,
good. She's really good. Fascinating.
She's just habitually a line stepper. She is stepping on that line over and over and over and pushing the buttons of this young girl, even more than Maximus. And he knows what Danvers is, can be creative, because that's what he's with his wife. And I wish that there was a little bit more actually between Maxim and Danvers, rather than them being so separated until the end of that. So I do agree with you a little bit on that, JD. Those are almost like my little things that I always like wish that there were just like a little bit of, a little bit of more extra stuff. Like, I think that this movie has 10 or 20 more minutes in it. I think it could even be greater than it already is, in my estimation. Just to kind of build these characters, because clearly there should be, if he's so haunted by his wife, well, his wife's co-conspirator is this woman, what I mean, who is the one that's making orders, like literally right when they're walking in from their honeymoon, it turns to, from that moment in, when the whole staff's there, this should be a chess match between the three of them. And it really becomes just a chess match between the two women.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And I think you make a great point there, that Ryan, that maybe we could have benefited from a little bit more of that regretful side of Maxim.
Yeah.
And maybe that could have also further justified his genuine interests in Joan. Because even, and again, tracing it back further, when I saw the film for the first time, even when we get to the literal final minutes of the film before we arrive back to Mandalay and it's burning down, I still half expected him to reveal himself as Norman Bates or something like that. Like, I was like, I still got that vibe from him. Like, I really did.
That's crazy how differently we saw that character.
I
think you're
never thought it.
Brendan, I think you're kind of right. Like, you just feel like he's kind of repented so much that there's so much like
easy to me.
Yeah,
like,
there's something still bubbling that he has to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And
there is something dubious. I do agree there, but I also feel like his empathy and his affection for Joan is genuine. Like, I don't feel like that's coming from some sort of manufacturer.
Let me say this. I don't think it's disingenuous, but I also still got the sense that this man is hiding something that he did torturously wrong. They were still treating his performance like a red herring that was still waiting to reveal something later.
Which I think it does still a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if the movie really
for the reasons we talked about, like,
yeah.
I still think that is there, even if the Hays Code seems to think that it's doing something differently, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I do think that
it does
red
add a little bit
herring
of nuance in the nature of Rebecca's death and how involved he may or may not have been. Like, I will say, if that was changed due to the Hays Code, it does add a tricky nature to the actual truth of it all, which might benefit the movie in some ways.
Well, I think it speaks to, and obviously we know this, but it speaks to how silly and dumb the Hays Code is, because it thinks that by changing it to it being accidental, then all of a sudden he's left off the hook, even though what he does is still very gray and dubious.
So, like, different back then, weren't they?
Yeah. Well, I mean, depending on some people on Twitter, they'd like to go back to that way, because there's not enough sex in fucking movies, and there's not enough, but there is a lot, and there's not enough here, but there's so much here. It's like, make up your minds, guys. Everybody seems so weird about, you know what I'm talking about? Like, there was so much of the discourse with Poor Things last year, and there's so much discourse with Challengers, and there's some this and that, and what can be in a movie, what can't be in a movie. It's like people are so hung up on this, and it's like people forget, because people aren't educated enough to go back. I'm sorry, I know that this sounds rude to say that, but these are just the truth. People aren't educated enough to go back into the history of a medium that they only cover since like movies from the 1980s, and examine the fact that there were laws put in that literally restricted the artists from being able to do certain things within a film, like you're talking about, JD, which is the Hays Codes. I mean, we talked about this on an old extra film series when we did Howard Hawks, about how some people sort of, and Billy Wilder, the subversion of the Hays Code and being able to use that to your advantage. And I don't think that Hitchcock is there just yet within the system enough, because Lord knows later in his career, he starts fighting against the Hollywood machine in creating movies like Psycho and The Birds and Vertigo and the classics that we know. But I think that maybe that is the tug and pull of being a more newish director to the Hollywood machine and making a movie like this. And I think
Hays
that
Code was somewhat new at the time, right? When was that established? Like mid-30s?
Mid-30s, yeah.
Okay.
And it's rampant throughout this decade. But then you also, that's what's so great about it, because then all the screwball comedies are literally, they're just tapping the line and how far they can go with things. And that's what makes them so great, and that's what makes them iconic.
Flirting with danger. I gotta
watch a movie like Only Angels Have Wings from Howard Hawks. And that movie is like, man, that is a middle finger to the Hays Code, if there ever was one, and yet the studios were okay with releasing it. So, but if you really look at the context of that movie, it's like, wow, he was pushing it. So, but I do think that maybe there are some compromises, that Hitchcock did make different than the source material. But overall, I think I love the book. I think it's a really great adaptation. I think it's a really great movie, and I listen. I hate that remake. Okay, on paper, it's actually not a bad idea.
So I guess it doesn't exist. I guess
it shouldn't exist. It's like somewhere in the Netflix algorithm. Like it's because it was like a Netflix movie. Kristen Scott Thomas playing Mrs. Danvers, not a bad choice. Lily James playing the Joan Fontaine character, maybe not bad. But I mean, like Armie Hammer playing Laurence Olivier playing Maxim. Like, what are we doing here? Like, Mr. Chompy himself, Mr. Cannibal. Like, come on, what are we doing here?
I had forgive me if I didn't notice you saying this earlier in this conversation, Ryan, but I didn't know you actually read the book that this was based on.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do know how to read. And
that's not what I was saying. I was actually genuinely curious. Like, so this is a very faithful adaptation in the sense of what we see on screen in Hitchcock's film is pretty in line with what we get.
It's pretty close. Like, what's actually what he does do, what he sort of adds is the final bit of the film. Like Danvers does melt the house down essentially, but we don't. But in the book, it's kind of more like the house is on fire, and so you kind of assume that it's Mrs. Danvers. This is like literally he lays it out like this is her, and I think that's. I think that final shot of her in the fire.
It's an unforgettable image. It's
really
an fantastic.
Unforgettable, just like full on obsessed, crazed, heartbroken. I would think also even a little bit too, if you want to throw that in there. Of the various emotions
like Hitchcock is known for making thrillers, obviously. I never really saw him as a quote unquote horror director in like the gothic sense of this time period, especially. I would say maybe like The Birds and Vertigo are probably the closest. I guess Psycho is definitely a horror film. But movies like Rear Window, I would say, are more in the thriller kind of side of things. But that final image is one of the most frightening things I think I've seen in a Hitchcock film.
It's great. I agree.
Yeah, it really is well done.
I gotta tell you, there's one moment in the scene that always, like, I feel like the air gets sucked out of the room for me, and I've seen this movie, probably a dozen times, and I gotta tell you, it's when Joan Fontaine's on the bed right after, and it's during the party, right?
Yeah.
And she's Danvers just screwed her over because she's dressed as Rebecca, right?
Yeah.
And Danvers having that brief pause, going to the window, opening it, and says, "You should leave here. You should go. Like you should leave
like
Mandalay."
Encourages her to jump off.
Exactly. And I sit there and every time and I go, "Oh my God, she's gonna push her off." Like
how
she's
did
gonna
that get
straight
through
up
the Hays Code?
That's what I'm saying. Like I'm like that is like suggestive
nasty.
suicide.
That is
it is
stuff.
it is a thorny scene. It's so vicious.
It is
and that's what I just kind of love about it, because it's it's wild to put this
Yeah.
in a movie like this in 1940.
I agree.
Yeah.
And to, I guess, put a wrap on the bow, at least from my perspective, with this debate between Brendan and I as it relates to Laurence Olivier here, to me, that is such a significant clue for me. In addition to Olivier's performance, I've talked about how I understand the volatility there. I do agree, Brendan, there's something bubbling underneath. There's a dubiousness there. I don't know if I could go as far as to feel the way you do about him, but I do agree there is something gray there. There's a volatility. There are the outbursts, but I also sense something melancholic in the character. There's something soulful and doleful there, and he still treats Joan with compassion, and I do think that is genuine. So I do think Laurence Olivier is very good at tapping into that duality, and you couple that with Mrs. Danvers, who has no subtlety in this film, and I say that as a great thing. That is an amazing thing about this film. Like, immediately she's antagonistic toward Joan, and given what we know about her and her relationship with Rebecca and how that complements some of the perhaps dubious behavior of Rebecca that we come to find out, to me, those clues are suggestive that Rebecca is perhaps more of a culprit here than Maxim is. That was at least my interpretation of it. So when we do get those reveals at the end, because Mrs. Danvers is, for all intents and purposes here, is the villain of this movie and is very clearly the antagonist to Joan. And because the perspective is from Joan, we get so much of that. Ryan, you talked eloquently earlier about how it's the chess game between the two of them primarily in this film.
For the soul of that house.
For the soul of that house. And Rebecca being such a ghostly presence there, assuming or at least implied that Mrs. Danvers is carrying out the ethos of Rebecca, that to me, the reveals did not surprise me at all. Of course it was Rebecca the whole time. Like, to me, it was more redundant than anything else. Now, I will say, again, more so than the revelations that we get from Maxim, it's more so how the film structurally changes after that I have more of a problem with, as I talked about
hump
earlier.
that it goes through.
But to me, Mrs. Danvers is such a great character. I love the foreboding presence of her. And given what she represents as it relates to Rebecca, that's why I felt so inclined to feel as if Rebecca was the one orchestrating everything here, because she was. It turns out.
That Danvers, she kind of reminds me of a less bubbly version of Midge from Vertigo. And in many ways, maybe what Midge does in that movie is a bit more, it's not as deliberate of a move against Scotty. You know, it's certainly a different thing there. But again, like I watched this movie in the context of film of Hitchcock's filmography, and it is kind of fascinating how much of the 2/3 here in Rebecca are very tonally in line with something like Vertigo 18 years later. Like, it does feel does feel very like Trial Run like for him. And that's not to undermine the film as something significantly lesser than Vertigo, even though I think Vertigo is his best movie. It's interesting how he would do both of these so close, not really so close together, but it's just interesting to see it this time beforehand, before he really became the household Hitchcockian name that we associate him with.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you guys have any final thoughts? I know we're kind of running long here, so I guess we can wind down. Any final thoughts?
From an awards perspective, I'd just like to say this real quick, if that's okay.
Yes.
I've actually covered this year on an episode of Kevin Jacobson's podcast in the runner-up is.
Great show.
I realized this about 5 minutes before we were recording that I had. So I've seen all the films, the 10 films nominated for Best Picture. There are some really bad movies in there.
Okay.
I'm looking at you, The Long Voyage Home in Our Town, and All This in Heaven Too. I'm looking at you. But there's some great films that went up against Rebecca for Best Picture. The Philadelphia Story, which is
I just watched that a few months ago.
An absolutely essential film of the era. Of
I
the
like
40s.
it. I'm not in love with it, but I like it.
I love that film.
Yeah, I love it too.
The Great Dictator, Charlie
Yeah, of
Chaplin's
course.
masterpiece.
Love me some
Mhm.
Chaplin.
Love that it got embraced enough here by the Academy for him to get
Yeah.
Best Picture and Best
All he had
Actor
to do was
nominated
talk,
too.
but it worked, I guess.
Yeah.
And but if everyone hasn't seen it, The Grapes of Wrath really is that movie. I know that we all probably saw it when we were in high school and watched it there. You know,
and we had to
because
read the book and do the
and we had to read the
comparison.
book and they beat it to death. But then like during the pandemic when I did the episode and I watched The Grapes of Wrath, gotta tell you, that movie kind of slaps. And it's really
Right.
beautiful and it's
Yeah.
just poetic. And John Ford,
That's a good movie. That's a good
it's a
movie.
good damn movie.
Yeah, that's a
and
really good movie.
Fonda's great. Jane Darwell won best supporting actress for playing Ma Jode. I don't think she's as good as Judith Anderson in this movie, but she's damn good in that movie. She has that monologue at the end. I would still give it to Rebecca, but it also was a director split. It went to John Ford for Grapes of Wrath. I probably give it to Hitchcock just because Hitchcock's never won an Best Director Oscar. He's never won he never won an Oscar, period. This is the only like awards thing that's ever happened to him in his career, which is
It's
why
so
the Oscars are
interesting.
Crazy.
So interesting.
why the Oscars are stupid. But they weren't last year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
it's like damn if you do,
They're
damn if you
learn-
don't.
Exactly.
They're learning from their mistakes.
I tell JD knows this. I get so mad with them, and then they do something like last year where like my favorite film wins. The director that I want that I've always loved, like Nolan, that we've all loved, like Nolan, gets his flowers. Killian wins. Like there's all these great wins, and I'm like,
it's the Godfather
shit,
3 every
you know?
other year.
it's
They'll,
like
they'll
every
rever-
time I'm out, they pull me back in. You
They'll-
know what I mean?
they'll- They'll reverse course next year when another Green Book wins.
Oh god,
That's what I
Brendan.
mean. Every other year, like you're like, I'm
Yeah.
done with the Oscars now till the
No, I
following year
think
comes.
it's gonna revert to something really small, like a, not like I'm saying like the quality
like a
of this movie,
Nomad
but
Land.
like a Moonlight, yeah, like a, like something really small, because like there doesn't
Yeah.
seem to be like a lot of big movies, and that was such a big movie last year. And like they usually then, like JD says, then they go teeny tiny on something. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, good movie. Really like it. Everyone should get the Criterion because it's an excellent Criterion restoration.
It is. I would agree with that.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful cover too. Yeah.
It is very modern feeling as well, but I think matches the just the overall aesthetic of the film. The film does really look ahead of its time, and that's something I really do appreciate about it. The music here by Franz Waxman, is really it's almost Bernard Herrmann-esque.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's like it's moving. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but like to say that this is also a trial run for Vertigo, that also comes through in the musicality of the film.
Yeah.
When I saw it for the first time, I thought it was a Bernard Herrmann score. It has some of those similar inflections, and I really like the music here. And Franz Waxman I guess he did the score for some of Hitchcock's earlier films as well, but also The Bride of Frankenstein of all things. So definitely one of the earlier names that I think someone we should remember. But yeah, the music here is really good.
JD, can I say one thing that last, and then I'll let you do a final thought.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not trying to cut your thunder, but I know how big a fan you are of this movie. It's like your favorite movie of all time.
Of course.
Is that the ending of this movie? They're 1 year separated, because in 41 is when Citizen Kane comes out. When you watch this movie and the way that the pillow kind of engulfs in the flames, right? The embroidery of the R there.
The framing is pretty similar.
It's
Yeah.
it felt
Yeah.
very similar to the shed at the end of Citizen Kane. I was thinking about that a lot. And by the way, JD, and this is for everybody out there, JD, I watched Citizen Kane last year again, and I can't get it out of my head. It's
so
an
good.
incredible film. Like I think about it all the goddamn
It's
time. I'm in
so
love
good.
with it all over again. And
I-
so, but no, I was thinking about that. Literally, there are certain shots, and I was like, I think that that Wells watched a lot of early Hitchcock to really invoke a lot of his sensitivities as a director.
I'm curious, even though the release dates are a year apart, what the production process was for both, because it does seem as if Wells and Hitchcock are working on a similar wavelength, technically speaking.
Yeah.
And while I love what Hitchcock does with Rebecca, I do think that in terms of technical prowess, they're pretty much on par. really the only difference is I think Wells takes that technical precision and just does it tenfold more than what we see with Rebecca.
Sure.
But in terms of the technical precision of both films, the editing, the cinematography of Rebecca is breathtaking. It really is fantastic.
It's amazing.
The set design, of course, the production of it is all fantastic. And something you said earlier, Brendan, that I don't think should be overlooked is the costuming of this film, because it really is a thematic component to the film when you consider how they try to turn Joan into something she's not. There is psychological warfare there, and it manifests itself a couple of different times in this film. And so that is also very important. So all of the technical components are working in spades. And I think that's why my frustrations of this film are so high, because there is a true masterpiece here, which a lot of people do claim that, Ryan being one of them.
Yeah.
But it's why I can't go there, because the final 15, 20 minutes of this film, I think, take this detour that is wholly unnecessary. Some of the reveals are redundant, but primarily it takes away from a perspective that I found so engulfing and so captivating and poignant that to remove that point of view, it just completely unravels the movie for maybe not completely, but certainly takes the wind out of the sails for me. And so I can't quite go that far, but everything preceding that I do think is quite immaculate. It's fantastic, including Laurence Olivier. We talked about him earlier. Judith Anderson is striking in this film. Also, shout out to George Sanders, who I think is actually quite fun and invigorating in his small little performance here.
I agree.
And I also want to emphasize another time Joan Fontaine. It seems like her reputation, especially in recent years, is a little mixed. Some are mild on her. She has this, at least in film Twitter circles, it's been a little polarized. But I think she is the beating heart of this film in many ways, because again, the perspective is from Joan throughout most of this movie, and there's this innocence to her that is exploited that I think comes through extremely well in her performance. That moment when she shows off her costume and you get the reaction there from the people in the room, it is utterly heartbreaking. It is devastating. She was so excited to surprise everyone in that room, especially Maxim. She was desperate to show them this costume that she had made. She didn't want anyone to see it. She wanted to see their surprise and the smile on their faces. That's what she's anticipating. Right. And then of course it's anything but that. And it's just heartbreaking. And I think Fontaine's performance sets that up impeccably. Yeah. Just the way that innocence is exploited here, I think it really is because of her performance. That's the reason it works more than anything else. Yeah. So like I do really love her performance here quite a lot. So
it's really good. It's really good.
You know, all of that to say, I still really like the film. Still really like it. Good movie.
Hate mail to JD Durant. InSession Film.
Well, I guess in the spirit
I'll read it
of
for
that,
you, JD.
Yes, if you agree or disagree with me, you can leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube, or reach out to us on social media, or email me InSessionFilm@gmail.com. That's fine. You can send your hate mail toward me. We can discuss.
Leave him alone.
15 minutes.
Leave him alone.
Further.
I'll take
it's fine.
I'll take it.
The world would be a dull place if we all agreed on everything.
Yes.
What do we always say around here? You know,
exactly.
So,
and
it's not like he's giving it 1 star. It's not like it's Madam Web.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Even if he did, who cared?
Yeah, who cares? It's just a movie.
It's really just the last 15 minutes that we'll debate. That's about it.
It's okay.
Oh, okay. Thank God this movie wasn't directed by Zack Snyder.
Oh God. Yeah. Wait, did you guys do The Scavenger or whatever that movie?
Yeah.
Did you guys review that one?
We discussed Rebel Moon. It released last week. Thanks for doing the plug there, Ryan. You can check out that podcast review.
I'll never watch
check out the review. Don't check out the movie.
I'll watch the review. I'm never gonna watch that movie. You couldn't pay me.
That's fine. You don't need to. Spoiler alert, you don't need to watch it.
Spoiler alert, I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
Spoiler
that's
alert, even
perfectly
further, you're smarter
understandable.
than both of us.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. As Ryan teased a second ago, on next week's show, we are reviewing not Citizen Kane, but instead, How Green Was My Valley, which won Best Picture that year.
I might not be here for that, but I'm just gonna say it's not a bad movie, but it's not Citizen Kane. There you go.
It's not Citizen Kane.
Man,
That's for sure.
I've never seen it yet, but I'm secretly hoping that
You never seen it?
I've not seen it.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm gonna come back and
be
see.
great.
I'm gonna come back and see it for the first time and say
Oh,
that was
man.
better than Citizen Kane.
We'll see.
And if that happens, I will be out of a job.
I think I
Brendan
think
is fired.
it's one of it goes along. I mean, you guys are going to go along this journey, and I just want to say this real quick. I love that you guys are doing this, and I'm going to try to come on various other ones, maybe not in the 40s,
Yeah,
but
for
various
sure.
other ones throughout y'all's, race to the
You're
race.
welcome back anytime, my friend.
Listen, I know that I definitely know this. I know I'll be coming on for some of the 70s, and definitely as we get closer and closer to more recent ones to yell and scream about. But I gotta tell you, the interesting thing about covering these is the movies that did win, because we always talk about like the movies that we love or the movies that don't win. The movies that do win from these eras are fascinating in terms of like the history and of the justification that these people made in voting for some movies that I think are garbage and some that are actually like good, but have no business beating other things. So it's just really interesting when you start comparing and contrasting things. But
Yeah.
I can't wait for you guys going on this journey,
It's
at
gonna be
least
fun.
for the 40s right now.
I think
yeah.
so. Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to it. You're, of course, welcome back anytime, my friend. First of all, thanks again for being here. Tell us where we can find you on social media and all your work online.
Well, you can find me on that stupid app called Twitter and Instagram, and the other one
X.
Yeah, I'm not going to call
Nobody
it that
calls
ever. No, we're not going there. And the other conflicted app, Letterboxd. You can find me on all those at Ryan McQuade 77. All my work's over at InSession Film. All my reviews. This week, I'm just going to tease a couple things. This week, I did something that will not stir any controversy at all. In honor of May the 4th, I did a live action Star Wars ranking piece for AwardsWatch. Genuinely going to be curious to see the kind of fans' reaction to it. It should be pretty chill, right? And you can also over at AwardsWatch. That's where all my interviews and reviews are. But also we do 2 podcasts over there. We do the AwardsWatch podcast that comes out weekly, that comes out on Mondays, and on Thursdays we do the Director Watch series with myself and a former voice that you heard on these airwaves before, and Jay Ledbetter. We're in the middle of a Sofia Coppola movie series right now.
Good director.
And we've been having a good time with that. We have an upcoming movie series that I cannot say any. Well, you know what? It's InSession Film. I'm going to give you all the exclusive one.
You'll bowl.
All right.
The next movie series that we are going to be doing over at AwardsWatch will be the one and only Mr. Tony Scott. And these two gentlemen are going to be on at least one episode apiece during that series. And I'm so excited.
Indeed.
And there's an episode particular that's going to happen. And I'm teasing it now. JD's coming on for Top Gun. And I got to tell you this. I am so ready for this because I'm just going to sit back, record, and let him go. I know that this is like his thing. And this is and it's going to be a long episode. And I can't wait. Brendan, we're obviously going to have you on too, my friend. It's going to be fun time this summer.
That's going to be great.
We've got a guest for every episode on that.
Good for you.
Everybody really is looking forward to doing that series. And we obviously wanted to have you guys on for that too. So that's where you can find me, AwardsWatch, and please listen to the show. We greatly appreciate it. We put a lot of hard work into it.
Of course, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. We love everyone over there at AwardsWatch. So please go and check out Ryan's stuff.
Oh, and thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
as always, I love you guys. I say this every
too.
time when I talk about InSession Film. I wouldn't be where I'm at. I wouldn't be able to do the things if it wasn't for JD and Brendan. Truly one of the greatest people that I know on this planet. I love you both
Appreciate you.
tremendously.
Yep.
Rock on.
And I love this show, and I'll do anything you ever ask for, legally speaking. I'm not going to burn down Mandalay for you, though. That's just. I'm not good with gasoline and matches.
You don't have to scuttle the boat. It's fine.
You're a closet arsonist right here.
It's fine. Regardless,
You keep
of what
saying
the Hitchcock
scuttle the
says.
boat, and I keep thinking scuttlebutt, and it's scaring the crap out
That's
of me.
what I thought you were saying. Yeah.
It is. It is
You
jarring.
can scuttlebutt too. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
No.
Scuttlebutt 2, electric scuttaloo.
But anyway, we appreciate you being here. We love you as well, my friend. This was a lot of fun. Can't wait to have you back. As we somewhat joked about a second ago, we do have a podcast review of Rebel Moon out from last week. We also talked about Sasquatch Sunset, which was really fun as well. So you can go and check that out. As far as reviews this week, we are going to be talking about Challengers, of course, and the horror film Late Night with the Devil. So you can be on the lookout for that.
Good movies.
There's a new Women in Session where they debate Romeo and Juliet from 1968 and 1996, which was really fun.
Yeah.
And there'll be a new Chasing the Gold episode this week as well, discussing Zendaya, who, of course, was in Challengers, and Dune a month ago as well. Already off to a great year for her. So you can be on the lookout for all of that. Again, I'll just reiterate that you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. Just search InSession Film. You'll find us on those platforms. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube, like the video, all of that fun stuff. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, rate and review us there. Subscribe to those apps as well. And I believe that is it. So do you guys have any final thoughts on anything before we get out of here for this episode?
Ryan, I love you. That's
Brendan.
it.
Brendan.
Yeah, we love you.
He finally said it after all these years.
I've said it a few times on the show. This is
says it
public
all the
record.
time,
This
but-
is public record, my friend.
Not enough, folks. Yeah. It's recorded now.
It's-
I love you both. I love doing this show. Hearing this music in my ear, it feels good. Final thought. I'm just gonna say it because it feels good. Football's great, and I gotta say,
Cool.
the draft was a lot of fun. But I'm gonna tell you this right now. I'm laying down the smackdown.
Yeah.
There's war
There's
between
war to be
me
had?
and JD this year.
Yes.
I'm coming to Ann Arbor,
Yes.
and I'm
sir.
taking a victory. Longhorns are coming to town, folks.
I thought the game
and,
was in Texas.
No, it's in Ann Arbor.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah,
At the big house. Okay.
it's at the big house. They're playing it at noon because they're too afraid to play us at night.
TV
They don't want us to
determines
get
that, by
drunk.
the
They
way.
don't want us to
TV
have fun.
Determines that.
Thanks a lot, Fox.
that's
Really
not
appreciate
their
it.
choice.
Yeah.
But I think it's gonna be a great game. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Sark, new coach, new quarterback, new things for the champions, but it's okay. They're just holding down the championship this year because Quinn and the boys are coming to take the crown. It's going to be a fun game. I'm sure JD and I aren't going to be yelling at each other in the coming months, but I'm enjoying it. And then, of course, Brendan, if I played Penn State, I mean, we all know how that would work. I mean, Sark would just...
Don't worry. When you guys also
If
join
it-
the Big Ten in a few years, well, that'll happen.
That'll happen when you join the Big Ten. Yeah. When every team.
Wait,
on the
why would
planet
we
is
join the Big Ten? We're going to the SEC. We're going to go dominate, baby. What are you talking about?
Everyone's going to be one collective
Oh, it's
conference,
just going to be one
is what
thing.
I'm saying.
Well, I feel like I do feel like we're all just going to go. We just should be one conference. We just should all just be the United States of college football. That's
It's going to be
what it should
Big Ten East, Big Ten West. That's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
It
They
just
should
should
just seriously do it like the
Down
NFL.
the
Just split the Big Ten and the SEC like the NFC and the AFC. Have your divisions. You can keep USC out west and Rutgers out east. And
I don't
leave it
like
at
the
that.
I don't like the 16-team playoff. I'm not a fan of it. We're just getting 12,
20?
and then we're going to 16. Like, just keep it. It should just be 8. It shouldn't be 12. It should just be 8.
But money,
I don't care.
Ryan.
Yeah,
I'm a
money
University of Texas fan. I don't need to worry. about money,
So
right?
yeah, more money, pay the players. That's what we have to do.
I mean, pay the
Yeah,
players.
that's-
Yes,
and that's where this is headed
Pay the
too. So
players.
Yeah.
it's the most
well, they get paid.
like this. pretending that college football is amateur athletics is dumb. It's incredibly profitable. You're talking about a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar business.
I gotta tell you though, my heart goes out to these coaches because man, they are like every day is a recruiting day. It is never stopping. Like I don't know how they don't sleep for 6 hours because in that 6 hours they might lose 6 recruits. Like it's insane.
That's why you have a big staff.
You gotta have like everybody. Like it's like, you know how like, you know, these companies, they have like a 24-hour service kind of thing, and they got like rotating schedules for that too. So but no, it's great. I love you both.
Love you too.
And hook 'em horns.
Yeah, no, appreciate you being here. Very much look forward to the fall as well. Hope everyone enjoyed our conversation of Rebecca. I think we're off to a good start here. I very much look forward to getting into this over the next several weeks.
For sure.
It'll be a lot of fun. So yeah, thanks again, Ryan, for being here. Really do appreciate it. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Oh man, what a fun movie to talk about.
Rebecca.